the children of the void. We hear them in our dreams. We feel them in our blood. They call, and we will answer. We will rise and claim the engines of labor that have bound us in servitude.
Welcome to the Objective Secure Podcast. My name's Mike.
Hey, I'm Emma.
This is episode 38, Biodiversity. We're not talking about Tyranids, in case you were questioning the title there. We're talking gene stealer cults again.
Yeah, so this is following on from episode 35.
Yeah, where we talked about the cult ambush and some of the sneakiness that can happen there.
Mm-hmm. And some of those things have since been FAQ'd since we did record that.
Yeah, they have. I mean, we jumped the gun, or we didn't jump the gun, I suppose. We did what was interesting at the time. And Games Workshop have obviously since released their FAQs, which tidy it up a little bit and ruin it a little bit. And we're now waiting for another FAQ to fix what the first FAQ generated. But if you're interested in listening to all things Subterranean Ambush and all about some of the sneakiness you can do with the cult in 8th edition 40k, go and check out episode 35. Because we cover the ambush rules in depth, particularly with some of the stratagems and some of the characters that get benefits out of it. Whereas today we're going to focus on some of the units and look at some of the...
Kind of a bit more generic, really.
Yeah, well, we had a lot of really positive feedback about the Assassins episode we did for the last one, so we're going to try out a very similar format, looking at some of the sort of more complete codexes, and the Gene Stealer cults is two things. It's shorter than most codexes, and it's an army I'm building right now and painting right now. So I actually have a vested interest in trying to understand how it all works.
So I have a vested interest in it being shorter, since we do try and keep this down to an hour, and we never do. And you have a vested interest because obviously you are emotionally involved as you're building an army.
Well, just behind you over there on that plastic tub, which obviously no one can see, is the army I've got prepared for skulls in 2 weeks' time.
Prepared would be an interesting choice of words.
Look, it's assembled.
I don't see any wheels on any of those vehicles.
No, they're in that tub there. They're black.
Yes.
They're painted separately.
Yes. Hence my questioning of the term assembled.
They're assembled.
They're on their way to assembly.
They're assembled.
They're in the assembly process.
They're assembled in pieces so that I can paint
them. In pieces.
so I can paint them separately.
I think we might need to re-examine the definition of the term assembled.
Nah, it's fine. It's been really good, actually, because this is an army that I started in 6th edition 40k.
Yeah, it's a long time ago.
And when the 8th edition dropped, I pulled the army out using the index, and they were a bit crap. And the codex has gone a long way to fixing a lot of the problems that were existent within the index. Mm-hmm. And it's actually given me the impetus to go, okay, cool. I've still got some models on sprue, so I set up last night and assembled what I needed to get the army up to 1,500 points. And as you can see, there's another tub over there which has got many more models in it. This one just here. Which,
all right. Yep. Yeah.
So there's actually more stuff.
Where the wheels are.
Yeah, where all the wheels are. Yep. But it's got more acolytes, the Patriarch, a bunch of Gene Stealers, all the heavy weapons for the Neophyte squads that aren't being used in this initial army. So I've culled the army down to
the 1,500
what I need to.
Yeah.
And then I've got plenty of opportunity to add to it and change it up as... once I get the core of it painted. So I've got 2 weeks to do that, because Skulls is the 7th of April. Have I got that day right?
So we went, yes you have. So we went to the first day of Outpost 6030 Skulls yesterday, just for a visit.
So that was Heresy, Infinity,
Age of Sigmar. Kings of War? No, I didn't see Kings of War yesterday. Infinity. War Machine.
War Machine. So they would have had probably 40, 45, maybe 50, maybe even 50. I don't know how many were in the room. I know there were about 16 playing Heresy.
10
for AOS. I think Infinity would have had at least 14 to 20.
Yeah.
The room looked pretty
I
full.
was just chatting to people. I wasn't going around counting them.
No. It was really good to see everyone out in force playing games. The Heresy guys had these full-on Imperial and Chaos banners that they'd hand-stitched and put up, which was awesome.
Actually, it was really cool looking at some of the different trophies that they had as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, look, I'm a big sucker for the Heresy anyway, so when I walked through that, Ryan Cross's Dark Angels were just... I loved them.
Dark Fallen Angels.
Yeah.
I liked it. Yeah. And his nameplates on
they were really cool.
Models are awesome.
He's I know he's chopped and changed armies more than a few times. I think those models have been about 4 different colours now. But I saw off the back of that in one of the groups I'm in on Facebook that he's already started painting the Fire Raptors for it, and I think this army's gone further than just about any of the others have, which is really exciting. So it's really great to see a nicely painted Dark Angels army. We saw Timo with his Ideneth Deepkin playing
my goodness,
AOS.
they're amazing.
So good. There'll be some photos in the show notes with this episode on the website. Really, really nice looking army. He's put an amazing amount of work into them, and I can't pronounce half the names of the units, so I'm not going to butcher them now.
No.
He was playing Russell with his army of Minotaurs and Beastmen, which is really cool. And that was
obviously in the
AOS stuff. Yeah, and it's amazing. Some of the hobby that's come out of those communities, like looking at there's the War Machine guys have painted a whole bunch of new stuff. There's some new terrain lurking in the Infinity group as well, which was really amazing. So,
well, I'd seen that Jacob had just built a whole heap of new Infinity stuff, and it's really cool because it's modular, and so it fits all inside of each other. And because Infinity is so terrain dense, obviously it takes up so much space. But this just sort of all packs down inside of each other, and it's really nice and compact when it's all packed away.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I think it's kind of cute.
Probably
not a descriptor that they're looking for, but
I'll send an email to Corvus Belly and let them know. Cute is the new tagline for Infinity, apparently. So we've got Skulls Day 2 happening on the 7th of April, which is 40k Bolt Action, Kings of War, and Malifaux, I think, are the 4 games they're running that day. And because they'd originally capped 40k at 20.
Yes.
And they had a waiting list, and I was number 1 on that waiting list because I missed out. And I went to the TOs and said, look, is this a logistics issue? Is it you're short on terrain and boards? And the answer was yes. I said, if I bring some from our sets, are there going to be more spots? And they said yes. So now I have a ticket, which is cool. So we're going to supply 8 boards and 8 tubs of terrain on the day, which will give them, 36 players?
I don't know.
Well, they had 10.
How many players
they had 10 tables, and then I have 18 tables, which makes it 36.
36, yes, it does.
So that's exciting because that's one of the biggest skulls we've had in a couple of years now. They've traditionally limited it to the sort of 20 number, but they had a lot of people keen to play, so they've listened to the market and they're giving those spots, which is really exciting. So we're happy to be supporting them and reciprocating the support that we've gained from them over the last couple of years in regards to our own events. So that'll be exciting. So by the time the next podcast comes out, I should have actually been to that event, shouldn't I? Yes.
Yes, just. Yeah.
So we might postpone recording it until after that event.
We don't ever record.
We have recorded well in advance before.
Oh, yeah, but purely because we weren't going to be in the country.
Well, we have to start building up a backlog now anyway, because as show gets closer, we need to make
true.
sure that we've got the schedules all sorted.
Yeah. But we're doing, so this Monday that we're recording this, and it doesn't go out till Wednesday, so that's actually really good for us.
Yes, it is. It'll mean that I'll try and get the editing done today. So we'll see how that goes. It was great to see that happening for Outpost again.
Yeah.
And
also to see people, so Jai and Sam had come up from Albany for the 40k, for the 30k event, and it's lovely to see them both. Yeah.
If you haven't checked out Sam and
Jackie.
Yeah, they do a podcast. Now I'm going to have to try and get the name right now.
I was going to say it's War on the Wastelands, but it's not.
No, that's
War
the
on
event that's
Echoes from the Wasteland.
Echoes from the Wasteland. Thank you. We'll try and find a link and chuck that in the show notes as well if you want to go and give them a listen. They are long episodes, and they are 2 very enthusiastic hobbyists in the 30k community who talk a lot of 30k. So if you've got some long drives and you're interested in 30k, they're definitely one that you can listen to.
Or an
big
army
painting
that needs
sessions.
Painting, yeah.
Definitely. If you're interested in 30k, they're worth going and having a listen to and give the boys some support. We've just had our... it was a week ago now that we did our first ITC event.
Yes.
We had 42 players registered and only 38 complete.
Mm-hmm.
4 games, 1 day, 1,250 points, 2 hours a game.
ITC.
Yep. ITC missions. Now, these were the missions that were run at LVO rather than the updated Champs missions that obviously get amended straight after LVO. We have to congratulate Dave Horn again for taking out the win for his 3rd tournament this year. He's now 3 for 3.
Did Dave get a ticket for Skulls?
I believe he did, yes. Actually, I know he did because he and I have been talking lists. He's already figured out how to beat me.
Nice.
So, I don't know whether I'll actually get a practice game in before then. It'd be nice to put my army on the table at least once before I take it, but...
Practice what you preach.
Well, it also depends on how much I can get. Like, if it's painting choice, then painting might actually have to win out.
Yeah, we've got a lot that we're working on at the moment, so I think that you're probably, sadly, not going to get a chance to have a practice.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I'll see how much work I can, like how late I can stay up, see how much time I can put in. But yeah, look, I think...
on the same day that we ran that, Mitch also ran the AOS doubles.
Yep, so...
He had 60
well, there were 60 registered. I don't know whether it was the full 30 teams. It might have only been 28 teams. I can't be sure. But it was great. I mean, we had 100 gamers in WA out playing 2 different events that day.
I think there was also something else happening as well.
Well, on the weekend just gone for Skulls, we also had one of the Blood Bowl events running.
Yes, that's right.
So it's actually been a busy couple of weeks for tournaments in Perth. We've had
it has. We'd hoped
pretty
to
much
get out to the Blood Bowl one, but we had an absolutely manic weekend. So
we had a 60th birthday on the Saturday at the same time, and then we had a busy Sunday as well. So we didn't get a chance to get to Blood Bowl.
60th birthday celebrations continuing.
Yep.
For someone who was denying the fact that she was turning 60, she seemed to have milked it for all it was worth.
The best thing is, I'm not sure she listens to these, so it's probably pretty safe to call her 60 because she doesn't like that.
No, not at all.
But yeah, so in the space of what has to have been, it'll be less than a month, we'll have seen 2 40k events, and just about every other major gaming system have at least one event in that time. And in some cases, it's 2, like AOS will have had 2.
Yep.
So it's really exciting. Like March has been
manic.
Well, yeah, it's been really, really huge for tournaments in WA, which is really exciting.
It is.
If you're interested in finding out any of those, we put as many of them as we're aware of onto the tournament calendar, which is on the website. If you go and click events, if you want to put an event on the site,
where the events tab is on objectivesecured.com.au. So it says events, and if you hover over that, there's like a little drop down that says add your event to our calendar. Click on that. Now you give me as much information as you possibly can, because the information you give me is what goes into the website. So once I have that, including links to
players packs or anything else.
Yeah, we're happy to host your players pack. But also links to, the Facebook event for it, where they can buy tickets, anything like that. Give me all that information and I can put that on the website so that, people come and look at Objective Secured to find out what events are happening near them. So if you've got an event, let us know so that we're able to give it a bit of a boost.
Yeah, particularly if it's a WA event. We don't mind having anyone from the east coast of Australia or anywhere else for that matter, but... No. Certainly, our focuses have been on the WA community. So if you've got an event happening in WA, whether it's Metro, whether it's regional, Albany, Geraldton, Kalgoorlie, or further north.
And that's it. If you are out in regional areas, we really would love to hear about the events that you're doing, because we do a road trip once a year down to Albany. Obviously, you've been a few times down to Bunbury for the events that are down at Beyond Games and Hobbies.
Yep.
There are gamers who do travel to play. Actually, any excuse possible they'd like to play. So if you've got an event that's happening, let us know so that we can, maybe
we'll happily try and promote it. And then, depending...
Plus, I really want to start camping, so...
Look, if I'm allowed to bring an army and play at a tournament while we camp...
No, you don't get to play. You just get to go and visit.
Oh, why not?
And have a look.
If we time it right, I could play.
No, I'm not camping by myself with 3 kids.
Well, no, I'd be there, just not for the day.
Yeah.
I'll work on that one.
You can work on it, but that's not going to happen. Same as my camping's been going to happen for the last 3 years, and it still hasn't. So,
look, if someone wants to host a tournament at Ningaloo Reef,
yes, do that.
That'd be great, because I think I'd have a buy-in there at that point.
You'd still only get to go watch.
No, I'd get to play. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to jump into the Gene Stealer Cult Codex review for 8th edition Warhammer 40,000.
And we're back.
I was waiting for "we're back." That's what we always get.
Okay, sorry. We're back. Did you miss me?
Well, it's suitably creepy, that sort of "we're back" type thing for this army, because this army is...
when you do it.
The Gene Stealer Cult army is one that has, ever since its induction into the game of 40k back in sometime in the late 80s or early 90s, during Rogue Trader, it's been a political satire. Much of what 40k originally was satire around the political landscape and the
Satire or political commentary?
a lot of it's satire. At least the original Rogue Trader was. Characters named after prominent political figures and totally not political figures, though, that sort of stuff. And I was saying to you off air, this particular army started its life as a commentary on part of English politics that was quite controversial during that period of history. And they've moved it now into something much more resembling modern day cults, where it is a indoctrinated life cycle and everyone kind of lives and breathes it.
So this codex has seen these stories expanded, but do you want to just, before we get into kind of really pulling it apart, for people who are perhaps newer to 40k or don't have an understanding of the Gene Stealer cult, do you want to share some of the story that goes behind it?
Yeah, well, so the Gene Stealers, again, if you wind back far enough into the bowels of 40k's history, the Gene Stealers weren't actually part of the Tyranid fleet. They were something separate. And over the years, particularly with the original releases of Space Hulk and Space Crusade, we got plastic models for the first time for the Gene Stealers, which I still have a unit of from all those years ago, the original plastic Gene Stealers. And the story changed so that those eventually they become part of the Tyranid hive fleets, and most currently that's where they come from these days. And the Tyranid, the Tyranid fleet has vanguard organisms like Gene Stealers, which are sent ahead of the fleets to kind of engage and look for worlds that are suitable for harvest. And in this case, a Gene Stealer typically boards an Imperial freighter or gets to a planet and then stows aboard another ship and gets off-world, goes to a planet, and then impregnates someone using its ovipositor, I think is the way you say it. It's basically, it impregnates a human, and the first generation of the cult is born. And as the cult spreads and they interbreed with each other and they bring more humans into the cult through psychic manipulation, do you want to just talk about the first generation, second generation, third generation, fourth generation? So the first generation of the cult are the real hybrid. They don't look human. They're much closer to a Gene Stealer. Big 3 arms is pretty common with the first cult acolytes. And then as they're
like a mutated.
Yeah, very, very heavily mutated. Big bulbous heads, no hair, quite purple in colour. Often with 3 arms, one of which is a claw. Tend to have big sort of bony carapace rather than skin. They're very clearly alien. And then as you move through to the second generation, they lose some of those features and get more human. And then the third generation is more human again. And then the fourth generation can pass for human, albeit bald human, typically speaking. They tend to have a slight pink or purple to their tone in terms of their skin. They don't tend to have carapaces anymore. And because of the variation within the Imperium of Man...
What's a carapace?
Like an ant's carapace, like a hard shell.
Okay. I've never heard an ant called a carapace. Like, I've never heard
it's like an exoskeleton.
Right. I've heard of exoskeleton.
Okay. A carapace is a hard shell.
Okay.
But because of the variety of the Imperium Man, it means that these slightly purpley humans can pass in society because they're slightly purpley. They're just a little bit different.
I know quite a few people who are an unusual shade of pink or purple, depending on how much they've been drinking, and quite a few of them are also bald. So, yeah. So
the cult spends years slowly cycling through this life cycle to the point where when the 5th generation is born, you get pure strain Gene Stealers again.
Mm-hmm.
And that then starts the cycle off again, where those gene stealers will then typically go out into the community and impregnate more people, and then you get another first generation wave of acolytes.
Now, that first gene stealer that came down is actually the Primarch.
The Patriarch.
Patriarch, sorry.
So, yeah, it, I suppose, because it's not gendered, becomes essentially a grandfather figure, and the Imperium has nicknamed it the Patriarch because it does sit in that sort of godfather mafia-style role where it is the head of the family. Mm-hmm. So they use the Patriarch as the nickname for it. It gets bigger, it gets stronger, it gets faster, it becomes psychically attuned and has the ability to start mind-controlling and manipulating people, which is obviously how it integrates itself into society. And then there's stories throughout the book that talk about most of the cults have this sort of uprising where they throw off their secretiveness and then they rise up against the human defenders and whatnot. But there's stories in the book where the cult becomes so massive and so influential that there is no uprising to speak of because they control everything. So their uprising is just a case of taking out the Adeptus Arbites and the police force, any of the remaining loyal Imperial forces on the planet, but it's not an uprising so much as a coup d'etat. Yeah. So yeah, the cult is very much a subtle machine which can take years to finally develop and rise up against the Imperium. And that typically happens when the High Fleet turns up, because as the cult grows, the Patriarch sends out a sort of a psychic beacon, the Tyranid High Fleet rocks up, the cult rises up against the Imperium, the Tyranids descend, it all goes to hell in a handbag, and then the cult finally realizes at the 11th hour that, oh, you know what? We've been worshipping these creatures, and they're not our friends, because then they all get eaten and turned into biomass for the Tyranid High Fleet, and then the High Fleet strips the planet and moves on. So it's quite a morbid army in that regard.
It's quite dark.
Because they think they're worshipping a god that's going to save them and bring them to the promised land, when in actual fact they're kind of like cats worshipping mice. Mice worshipping cats.
Yeah.
All the while trying to help the cats defeat the rats, not realizing that they're on the menu as well. So it's quite a cool army, and over the years it started off as very mafia-esque. Like they used to get cult limos, and it was that sort of Godfather-esque style army. And these days it's much closer to a mining colony. A lot of the weapons are mining, a lot of the vehicles are mining. The models themselves are wearing mining vests, and I mean, I want to paint mine in high-vis orange because I think that's just going to be cool. It also matches the cult creed. I've got is my favourite one, so that works really well for me. And they're definitely an army that's seen variations on it, where it's gone from organised crime to now it is an underground, illegal sort of club.
So, without focusing on it too much, one of the changes that has happened is the references to suicide bombers have been removed.
Yeah, so there was a time when some of the... and we're talking Rogue Trader at this point, going way back, where you could get, and Gene Stealer cults weren't the only faction that had this in it, and a lot of those obviously have been removed for...
what is hopefully obvious reasons.
Yes.
Yeah.
But we still have demo charges and grenades and, mining style equipment. We just don't have the connotations that go along with that sort of...
Yeah, and there's still things like unquestioning loyalty.
Yeah, well,
as well, which... Which
is a great rule in the actual codex, because it helps you protect your characters from Imperial assassins and those sorts of things that can target them. But at the same time, like you say, it's literally, when you actually think about the army in context, it is very, very cult. And it's got a lot of real world tie-ins in that regard. And it's an interesting army to kind of, the more you think about it, the more you think, oh god, like this is a bit...
if I think about any of this stuff, I can go way too deep, and it's probably this isn't the forum for it.
No, probably not.
Yeah.
But the cult is an interesting one, because you do get unquestioning loyalty for most of the units. I remember seeing a lot of people going, oh, the Patriarch doesn't have unquestioning loyalty, and when you actually read the rule, it's about a unit with this rule jumping in the way of a character to protect it.
Yeah.
The Patriarch's never going to jump.
Never going to put himself in the... No.
So it makes complete sense he doesn't have that rule.
Yeah.
And it should be noted that every single unit in this codex does have the cult ambush rule.
Mm-hmm.
However, it's only infantry and bikes that can subterranean assault out of cold ambush. So the whole army can be deployed as blips, and the FAQ clarified that.
Mm-hmm.
So you can do a whole blip army, you can do a half in subterranean assault and half blips, and there are a few different ways of moving blips around and moving them from blip to ambush and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So it's definitely it encourages you, like we said in episode 35, to play pure cold.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so with this, they've, I guess with the Gene Stealer cult, they've expanded and added new units each time they've reiterated the codex?
Yeah, we lost the cult limos, and I know there's plenty of people out there who've done conversions of limos. There's even third-party limos designed in the old aesthetic, like stretch hover limo type stuff.
Very cool.
Sadly, there's no rules for them these days, and they don't really line up with anything in the codex. Although if you're playing with friends, you could easily just run them as a truck or something. Yeah. But it has been good that they've actually given them some attention. So we got a whole range of new kits in 6th edition when they re-released the codex for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, probably another 10 different editions this time around.
Mm.
Most of those are actually independent characters, but we did get 2 new units as well. So they've definitely done more and more with this each time they've released it, and they've turned it into something that is more close to a standalone book than it ever has been.
Yeah. So looking at the codex as a whole, there are 6 HQ, 3 troops, 9 elite, 4 fast, 3 heavy, 2 transports, and 1 fortification.
That fortification one at the end is something they've been doing a lot recently. Like the new Chaos stuff we've just had previewed, they put a fortification in. The Harlequins got a fortification when that book came out.
So what it looks like is that fortifications have been used quite a lot in Age of Sigmar.
Yeah.
But they don't seem to make it to the table for 40k.
I definitely think the fortifications in 40k add a lot of flavour to the army. So we got the webway gates with the Eldar. We've got a big repair crane mechanism for the knights. The Chaos one's a big Stargate webway portal thingy. With this, we got a giant drilling machine.
Yeah.
And they're all, I think, really well themed, and the kits are really good, and obviously it's scenery, so if you need scenery for your boards, there's no reason not to get them.
Yeah.
Sadly, the rules a lot of the time, particularly for competitive play, and I suppose we should clarify that a lot of the opinions I have about this book revolve around competitive play. It's very easy to write them off because they either cost too many points and don't do enough, or the biggest issue for most fortifications is that they take up a detachment. And in competitive play, you typically only get 2 or 3 detachments. And when you build this army, because everything is so cheap, running 3 detachments...
And by cheap, he's talking about points.
Oh, yeah. This is probably the most dollars-wise expensive army in the game right now.
Particularly in Australia.
Yeah, particularly over here. But yeah, so you end up in this position where you want to run the detachments to get all the different cool combos, and they've got...
Just out of interest, what's the cheapest army dollar-wise?
Dollar-wise? My gut feeling is actually Imperial Knights, because you can do that with 3 models and about $700 for 2,000 points.
So one of the few armies that you don't own.
Oh no, I've got knights. I've got 3 knights, but they're not the big knights. I'd need to buy different knights to make that work. No, look, I mean, most of the hyper elite stuff where you start looking at custodes, knights, grey knights even, low model count, high point value models, it's not too hard. I mean, it's a balancing act of finding where that sits. But the problem with the Gene Stealer cult, particularly in Australia, is you've got units that are 7 points a model. Yeah. So 35 points for a box set of 5.
No, don't get to that. It's further down in my notes.
And then they cost way more than that, dollar-wise. So, but what I was about to say was...
sorry, before I cut you off.
The detachment side of things actually ties into one of their match play rules, which is another reason why you won't see the frag drill.
Yeah.
Which is... what's it called again?
The rules?
Yeah, there's two match play rules.
Yeah, so there's the Gene Sect and Broodfather.
Yeah, so Gene Sect is the one that I'm thinking of.
Each character can only be taken once per detachment.
Yeah, so the army really focuses around its characters to give its auras and buffs and effects. So when you've only got 3 detachments...
Which means you've only got 3
you can only take 3 of each of these characters,
Yeah.
but you obviously need to take a detachment to put them in.
Yeah.
So the second that you decide you need 3 Calamorphs or 3 Magus or 3 Primus,
Yeah, you then can't.
you can't take the fortification.
Yeah.
And that's probably the biggest, for this army at least, it's the biggest reason why you won't see a frag drill in a tournament army, because it costs you too much to put in the army, not just in points and dollars, because they're both actually affordable. It's to do with the detachment.
I really love that we've sat for an hour and a half to go through and create a plan for what we're going to talk about, and I have 12 pages of notes, and you've jumped from literally halfway through my first page to my last page of notes to be talking about this.
Okay.
So
No.
flick
No.
through.
We'll get you back on. We'll get you back on track. Go
Right.
back. So we've.
It's not me that's off track.
It is.
No, it's not.
So yeah, the gene sect rules definitely have an impact on that.
Yes. Right.
So the other rule, what was the other
No,
one?
we're not on rules yet.
Yes, we are.
We're at 6 cult creeds to choose from, and they all feel different on the table.
Fine.
That's where we're at now.
Fine. Yes, we do have 6 cult creeds now, which is the other new addition to the codex, which we haven't had before.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you've got the codex there. Why don't you tell us what they are?
Because they're not written in my notes.
I know.
Right, so
That's why I've got to making.
They're towards the back of the book from memory.
So my favourite one is the Rusted Claw, which I've already said earlier. So they've
I'm
each
not sure whether you said that on here or you said it just when we were talking
they've
about
each got a name, and then they've got like a theme that goes with them.
Yeah, so Cult of the Four-Armed Emperor, which is subterranean ambushes.
Yeah, which is so they give you the name of the creed, and then they give you like the tagline or the special rules name essentially. So from memory, this one's +1 to charges and advance rolls in turn 1 or the turn you deploy from ambush. Yep. Which is, I think, a really good default cult for anyone to take because it works for the army. It works really well and synergizes really well.
Yeah. The next one is the Pauper Prince's Devoted Zealots.
Now, this is actually one that I wrote off in the start because I don't even remember what the rule is for it.
You can reroll hit rolls for attacks made with melee weapons by a unit
that's
with
right.
Cult Creed in turn, which it's made in a charge move, was charged or performed a heroic intervention.
So this is one that, like I say, I wrote off because of the way you can stack other things in the codex, because there's other ways of getting rerolls.
Yeah.
The difference is that you can put like a cult icon in some of the units, which gives you reroll 1s. This is reroll everything.
So, sorry to just
Yeah.
interrupt. So this is kind of what I was talking about before with the unquestioning loyalty, but this kind of underpinning that goes with it. So this says the cultists of the Pauper Princess are so zealous they will gladly hurl themselves on an active frag grenade to protect their cult leaders.
Yeah.
So it's kind of that. It's just that underlying theme the whole way through.
There is a lot of that, yeah.
Yeah.
So the Pauper Princes is you'd build a big assault army with it, but like I say, the problem with this cult more than a lot of the others is like the stratagem's good, the relics and stuff is okay, but the actual cult rule means that you don't necessarily need a lot of the buffs that come with the characters, but you're gonna have to take the characters anyway.
Yeah.
So I don't see this as being one that you'll see regularly on the table.
The Hive Cult Disciplined Militants.
I really like this cult, but it comes back to its stratagem more than its actual rule.
You got anything else you want to say about it?
Well, you can read the rule.
Right. I thought you were going to share it with us. If a unit with this cult creed fails a morale test, halve the number of models that flee, rounding up. In addition, units with the cult creed can still shoot in a turn which they fall back, but if they do so, you must subtract 1 from their hit rolls in the shooting phase of that turn.
So this is a mixed bag. They've got a stratagem which gives them +1 to hit, which is really good, but you have to inflict damage on the target first.
Okay.
And because of the way the army works with auras and stackable effects, it's possible to get the Gene Stealers down to hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. The problem with it is that the first half of that, where you halve the amount of models lost from morale, is going to be a mixed bag, because if you've got a Patriarch in the army, he's got a rule that's better. What's really good about this cult, though, is the fallback and still shoot.
Yes.
And I think that what will happen is you'll actually see this used for vehicle-heavy armies rather than infantry armies, because there's no flying vehicles in the army. So normally if you fall back with a vehicle without fly, you can't shoot.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now you've got a hypermobile army of vehicles that can fall back and shoot. You can't just tag them in combat to stop them shooting at you. So I think that's probably more where the hive cult will sit.
Mm-hmm.
There was actually a really good article written by one of the Knights of the Gaming Table that talked about this exact situation. And it's I've got a baby version of it for Skulls that I'm going to run to try it out.
Cool. Next one is the Bladed Cog, cyborgized hybrid.
So I've seen some really great kit bashes for this. They take the Adeptus Mechanicus miniatures and then smash them together with the Neophytes and the Acolytes. So you've got these robotic hybrids. It's a 6+ invulnerable save.
Yes. Yep.
Or it increases an existing invulnerable save by 1 from memory.
To a maximum of +3.
Yep. So, or 3+. So...
Oh, yeah, sorry. In addition, infantry models with this cult creed do not suffer the penalty to their hit rolls for moving and shooting heavy weapons.
Yeah, so you're going to see... I think if you build this properly, you're going to be building it with maxed out units of Neophytes, using all the mining weapons, and you'll have 100+ bodies on the table to maximise the amount of heavy weapons you can fit.
Yeah.
To gain the biggest advantages out of it. And the fact that they've always got an invulnerable save of 6 means that you're getting a save against everything, which is just going to be irritating en masse. If you've got 150 bodies, you've essentially got 1/6 more than that.
Next one is the Twisted Helix experimental subjects.
This is basically +1 strength army-wide from memory.
Yes, that's right. In addition, add 2 to advance rolls for a unit with this cult creed.
Yeah, and this is one that a lot of players jumped on straight away because it makes Acolyte strength 5, which means they wound everything in standard 40k on 5s, not 6s. It makes them wound on 3s against a big number of toughness 4 and lower targets as well.
Mm-hmm.
So on face value, this is a really easy plug-in for the army.
Yeah.
The problem is there are other ways of getting the pluses to strength through auras and
without needing
that sort of stuff. So I feel like it's another one of those that people default to because it doesn't require them to think about the positioning and the auras as much, and it lets them be a bit more fluid on the table without worrying about where their characters are. But I think if you're willing to do the yards and build the army around those auras, you actually get more out of the other creeds.
Which brings us to the one that you haven't stopped talking about all morning, the Rusted Claw, Nomadic Survivalists.
Yeah, so there's 2 parts to this. The first is that if you're a bike, then you don't suffer the penalty for moving and shooting with heavy weapons, which is okay. The Adelan...
Or for advancing and shooting assault weapons.
Oh, that's cool. It basically means that the Adelan Jackal unit and the Jackal Sniper, so the Sniper's a heavy weapon, so she now drives around shooting and hitting on 2s, regardless of whether she moved or not.
Yep.
The Jackal bikers themselves all have assault shotguns, which means they're not suffering the -1 for moving and shooting, which is great. And the quads, the wolf quads, as part of those units, all have heavy weapons, which means you now can move and shoot those as well. And when you start stacking the Jackal Alphas' abilities with their abilities, with some of the cult stratagems, you get a unit that's hitting on 3s or 2s, throwing multiple grenades, and they're really, it's a really great synergistic combo. But the second part of it is when you're attacked by a weapon with an AP of 0 or -1, and you're an infantry or a biker,
AP is armor penetration, just in case anybody who's listening to this is new to it. I'm trying to stop using acronyms as much as possible because you've been gaming for 30 years and know what they all are, but other people who are potentially new don't have a clue what AP is.
So basically it means that you get +1 to your armor saves as long as the weapon shooting at you is only 0 or -1, which is really cool because things like a Neophyte squad that only have a 5+ armor save instantly become a 4+ against the average anti-infantry weapons, or stay at a 5+ if they've got a bigger anti-infantry gun. And then if they're in cover, you get another +1, so you can have a 6-point model with a 3+ armor save. So you're paying 6 points for a Space Marine durability, which is a big deal when those models pay twice what you do for it. So it's my favourite one because it lets you build an army around these really fast mobile units of Jackals, and then you've still got an option to put 20 Neophytes or 20 Acolytes on the table, safe in the knowledge that when you shoot them with bolt guns and so those anti-personnel weapons, they're actually hard to shift. They're not just going to die to a stiff breeze, which is the biggest problem with the cult. So I really like the Rusted Claw because it is so flexible in what it lets you do. And the stratagems are good. The relic's a bit okay, but yeah, it's my favourite of them. And like I say, the Hive Cult, I think, has an interesting little niche for vehicle armies, which, like I say, I want to try.
Yeah, I'm just going to jump in now and say that if you are listening to this and you're expecting this to be finished in an hour, it's really not going to be. We're not even a tenth of the way through the notes, and we've been chatting for
20 minutes.
Yeah, 20 minutes just on this particular section.
Anyway,
so
we'll move on.
It's going to be a long one.
Yeah, it's going to be a long one. Moving on.
So there are 3 rules for the whole army. There's unquestioning loyalty, which we spoke about before. So that lets you shift damage.
I suppose there's 4 technically, because you've also got cult ambush, but we covered that in episode 35.
Already, so, yeah. Just in case you missed it, episode 35. So that lets you shift damage from one character to friendly models, which is obviously important with the new assassins.
Yes, because you, it's just a good way. You can just kind of throw. A great one is chucking a patriarch into combat with a knight. Mm-hmm. If you throw another unit into combat with the knight, even near the patriarch, it means that when the patriarch is getting kicked in the face by the knight, you can just palm that damage off, so the patriarch's just not going to die. Yeah. Which is important because most of the Gene Style characters are really squishy. Even the patriarch, despite his really impressive stat line, is still squishy in context.
Don't you get to that? We're getting to that in a minute.
Okay.
We're focusing on the rules.
This is why you have a plan and I don't.
Oh my goodness. So for matched play, there are then two rules that apply to match play.
Yep.
One is the gene sect that you discussed.
Yep.
And the other one is Broodfather.
Yep, which basically says if you have a patriarch in your army, it has to be the warlord.
Yes.
But that's okay, because it ties into a stratagem called Brood Coven, which for one command point lets you give a Magus and a Primus a warlord trait as well.
Okay.
And then there's other ways of stacking it. So if you go into the Vigilus, which we're not talking about today, but Vigilus has an option to actually add more warlord traits to the army through different stratagems. Mm-hmm. So at the moment, you could have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You could have up to 6 warlords in a Gene Style Cult army right now.
Yeah.
But it does cost you 5 CP to do it.
Okay.
So you might not do that too often.
Yeah.
But you could in theory.
Okay, so Cult Creed. I know we just went through the 6 of them.
This is actually how the Cult Creed's applied, because this is something that a lot of people get wrong.
Yeah. So,
and a lot of the reviews I've watched have gotten it wrong.
Well, fingers crossed we're not going to get it wrong.
Hopefully not.
Hopefully you understand it.
I'm sure I'm mostly sure I understand it.
Okay, let us know if we get this wrong.
I don't think we do. It's fine.
So, Cult Creeds. Every unit in the Codex that has the cult keyword swaps that for the name of one of those 6 Cult Creeds.
Yep. So the 6 that we just mentioned. So the Rusted Claw, Bladed Cog, and so on. Yeah.
Anything with Brood Brother.
I was Boob Brothers.
I said Bood. I didn't say Boob. Brood Brother word doesn't get to pick a cult word.
No. So on their data sheets, they all say Brood Brothers rather than cult in parentheses. Mm-hmm.
Now, for some reason in my notes, I've written most characters have auras, but I don't think that's actually relevant.
Well, it is relevant because when you take a character, their auras, generally speaking, will reference that same keyword that they've just had to pick. So when you take a Jackal Alpha, she has an aura. Mm-hmm. You make her Rusted Claw, so you replace all references on her data sheet with Rusted Claw. Yeah. So you can mix and match cults in a detachment, but if you do that, you lose the benefit. You don't get the creed. Yes. You get the keywords, but you don't get the creed. Yeah. And it's the same with putting Ultramarines and Imperial Fists in a Space Marine army. You get the keyword, you just don't get the rule that goes with those keywords. And my next note is that keyword is different to cult creed. Yes. So you allocate the cult keyword, oh my goodness, onomatopoeias, to each unit in the army list. Yep. And then if all units in the detachment share the keyword or they're Brood Brothers, yep, then you get the benefit of the cult creed. Yep, exactly. So it's easy for you to chuck in Sentinels or heavy weapon teams and whatnot into a detachment without worrying about that. Mm-hmm. So you're still going to get the benefits for everything else. But the cult creed is special rule for that detachment, but the Brood Brothers still don't get the benefit of that. No. Because they don't have the keyword. Exactly. So you don't have to have... Not everything needs to have the keyword if it's a Brood Brother. Yes. However, because Brood Brothers don't have the keyword, they don't get anything. Which is the primary reason why there's a few of these units that I like running as much cult as I can over slightly cheaper Brood Brothers. Yeah. And also anything with the Gene Stealer keyword, even though they have the cult keyword, they don't get the cult creed rules. Same with anything with the vehicle keyword.
Yeah, that was my next point. So we created a little flowchart.
Which I might have to do up nicely and put in the show notes.
So the first question is the detachment battle-forged? Does it contain one cult keyword and or Brood Brothers? If the answer's no, then they get no cult creed rules.
Yep, but they keep their keywords.
If the answer's yes, all units with cult keyword gain cult creed rules.
Yes.
Does it have gene stealer keyword or is it a vehicle?
Or the vehicle keyword, yeah.
Yes. So if the answer is no, then they retain the keyword and the creed. And if the answer is yes, then they keep the cult keyword, but they don't get the creed.
Yeah, and that's just to represent the fact that, first of all, vehicles can't be ethical in regards to the cult's nature, and that gene stealers are aliens. They're not indoctrinated. They are living idols, essentially, to the cult. So just because you like to cover yourself in like technology to be a bladed cog and cybernetics, the gene stealer's probably not going to let you do that and isn't interested in doing that.
Yeah.
So the gene stealers and the vehicles get the keywords but don't get the creed rules.
So when I've sort of been writing notes about it, I think it's useful to remember the backstory of it as to why that doesn't apply to the gene stealers.
Oh, yeah. And look, I would love the gene stealers are in an interesting spot in this book, and we'll talk a bit more about why when we get to them. But it feels like there's a missed opportunity here as part of the codex, but we'll talk about that when we get to the gene stealer entry.
Okay. So we're going to talk about HQ now.
The unit entries, yep.
Yes. And we're going to do a little bit of kind of comparison to kind of, I guess, explain things a little bit.
Well, the codex, unlike a lot of them, has these very detailed descriptions and kind of uses some of the anecdotal comparison words that we're going to use now. So,
okay.
We'll try and keep it not political, but some of the words that are going to be referenced as well will be slightly political because that's kind of the structure of the cult and how it's described. Mm-hmm. So, Patriarch?
Patriarch. So, Patriarch is, I think you used the term Godfather before.
Yep.
But when we were going through discussing it, we used the term like the king,
yep.
The monarch. Now, you said before that there's no kind of references to whether the Patriarch is male or female. It's tricky because Patriarch by its nature is male.
But it injects eggs into its host. It is weird. The model itself, which you can see just over there, the black one in the box, has a very large, I'm assuming it should be a tail. It curls up between its legs. Doesn't look like a tail in that.
Looks a bit scorpion tail-ish.
Well, its profile side on is actually the cult, the Gene Stealer cult logo, which is very clever.
Yeah.
But it's a very male sort of shape. But it's an alien, so I don't think gender is a factor for it.
Yeah, no. So it is the biggest Gene Stealer.
Yep. Normally there's only one Patriarch per cult. Mm-hmm. There are references in the book of multiple cults ending up on the same planet, where one's on one continent and one's on another continent.
Yeah.
And so you can end up with multiple Patriarchs on a world in the stories.
Yeah.
But generally, if multiple Gene Stealers end up on a planet, one of them evolves to a Patriarch, and the others essentially become princelings, which is what they were referenced in the Overkill box. You actually got princeling Gene Stealers, which were pure strain Gene Stealers from the same original brood. Mm-hmm. So there's still that royalty reference there of a king and princes, essentially.
So there are lots of ways to make him stronger, faster, and more dangerous.
Oh, yes.
But the base model is 125 points, and he seems to be pretty strong for that points level.
He's pretty scary.
Comparatively.
For the 125 points, you get a model that is more than a match for just about any of the other basic characters in the game, and will scare some of the bigger characters in the game. He's lots of attacks, good strength, good weapon skill. He gives an aura to benefit other Gene Stealers. So if you do have other Gene Stealers nearby, he gives them a bonus. He's got an awesome aura.
You did say before that he's a bit squishy. I've written down not necessarily very durable, and he can die easily, but there are things that you can do to...
Well, unquestioning loyalty is the best thing for him. It keeps him alive as much longer. Mm-hmm. But I can kind of see him being run one of two ways. Yeah. He either gets run as using his living idol rule, which it basically says that if friendly cult units within 6 don't suffer morale, which is absolutely huge. There's a whole bunch of armies over the last 18 months that have used a similar rule to keep huge hordes of models on the table without worrying about morale, because it's a big risk for big armies like that. So having him sat in the middle of an army where there's 100 models around him and every one of them can't run away means you have to kill 100 of them to get to him.
Yeah.
So they're fighting at full efficiency the whole time, which is really good. The second way, which I've seen a bunch of the Genestealer cult groups do, is try and turn the Patriarch Super Saiyan. So it's a Dragon Ball Z reference where you basically just spend command points and relics and psychic powers to give him more attacks, a higher strength. You give him the right warlord traits to buff those attacks and strength as well. And you turn him into a walking blender that kind of grabs a unit, demolishes it, and there's nothing left to fight back.
So, and one of those is utilising Might from Beyond.
Yeah, so there's the Psychic Power Might from Beyond, which is +1 strength and attack. There's a relic that goes on the Icon Ward, which we'll talk about in a second, that's +1 strength. So instantly this thing's already strength 8, 7 attacks. There's a Warlord trait that boosts its attacks and toughness, which makes it harder to kill and gives it another attack. I think you can get it out to strength 9 and 9 attacks, I think, or strength 10 and 9 attacks. You can actually get it out there to the point where as soon as it hits strength 9, that's kind of, after that it's not really relevant. But a lot of people wanted the Twisted Helix to work on Genestealers, and of course the Patriarch has the Genestealer keyword because it's a Genestealer.
Yeah.
And as soon as you could, if Cult Creeds worked on them, oh my god, like you'd have this thing walking around at base strength 7 as a Twisted Helix, and the Genestealers will all be base strength 5, and then you start stacking these buffs on them, and they start getting scary really quickly. As it stands now, he's going to munch units. He's going to kill anything with that invulnerable save really rapidly. And if you do spend the, set it up so that you can power him up, he does flat damage in close combat when he starts rolling 6s, and a high save modifier, and it's D3s if he's not rolling 6s.
Yeah.
So if he's out at 9 attacks against a knight, wounding on 3s and doing D3s, he's probably not going to kill a knight.
No, but he's going to do some damage.
But he's going to rip chunks out of it, and if it's hurt before he goes in, he's probably going to kill it. The only thing he struggles with is an invulnerable save. If he has to charge something like Gilliman or even a 4-up invulnerable, he's got a volume of attacks, so he just needs a few of them to sneak past the save, and then he'll kill whatever's there.
Yeah.
But charging a unit that's 4-up invulnerable, like a big unit of Storm Shield Terminators, not that you see those much, but anything with a lot of invul saves means that he'll bounce, at which point he's probably in a bad place, and he needs to have something to then use Unquestioning Loyalty to kind of tip the wounds over.
Yeah.
But I think you'll see him in a lot of armies. Ironically, not mine next week, because even though he's only 125 points,
you couldn't fit him in.
1,500 points meant for me to run the army I wanted to run with the models without having to buy anything. I couldn't fit him in, even though I've got 2 of them. Yeah, 2 of them.
After just finishing saying that you often won't see more than one.
Yeah,
it's nice
I actually have another.
2.
I have another on Sprue, and I have another one from the Space Hotbox game.
Perfect.
I'm going to sell one. I can only put 3 in an army, and
Yeah,
I've got 4. So
the next model is Magus.
Yep.
And so she's a psyker. Well, she's a she now. She was a he.
Well, you can still get the he model.
Yeah.
But the she is such a good model.
Yeah. And the story is, I guess, has Magus as like a prime minister. So 4th generation hybrid. She looks human. She's the political face of the cult. And she uses that psychic ability to manipulate.
Yeah. And in the game, she's squishy, which is a very common theme for all of these characters, bar even the Patriarch is. But her biggest thing is her psychic power. She casts 2, denies 1. She's got an aura, which I'm really sad they changed in the FAQ. She had an amazing aura, which essentially let friendly units within 24 of her deny psychic abilities.
Yeah.
So you put her in like 10 units around her, and you've got this wall that just goes, "Nut, we're going to deny your psychics." Yeah. Now it's only 12 inches. So it's still
a decent...
But it's also 12 inches of the unit. So she had an aura that affected everyone around her, and then they had a 24-inch deny range.
Okay.
Now they've only got a 12-inch deny range. So you have to be really engaged.
So with that 12-inch aura, is that Is it 12 inches from the front of the model to the front of
Yeah,
the
it's-
aura, or 6 inches? So it's 12 inches. Is it a 12-inch diameter or a 12-inch circumference?
You mean radius?
Well, it's the same thing, but yeah.
Yeah, it's a radius. So it's 12 inches between the two models.
Okay.
But it doesn't change the fact that putting a Magus in the army is going to be pretty standard. The psychic powers are... Well, 4 of the... or even 5 of the 6 are really good. Mass Hypnosis stops Overwatch and means the enemy has to fight last, which is really important for an army that wants to charge. Mental Onslaught, when you stack it right, can one-shot models because it just deals mortal wounds. And if you... It's an opposed leadership test. So you roll a dice, I roll a dice, we both add our leadership. When I beat you, you take a wound and we roll again. And we keep rolling until I don't beat you.
Okay.
So normally you'll get a handful of wounds before the dice just play that out.
Yeah.
But if you give it to a Patriarch and then stack the auras and stuff, you can actually get it to a point where the Patriarch is leadership 12 or leadership 13. And as soon as the difference is 6, you can't win. At that point, you just instantly die.
Okay.
Because you can't win, we just keep rolling until you die. So it's really hard to do. And I've seen plenty of people going, oh my God, like I can kill a knight with this. Yeah. You can.
It just takes a fair amount
to actually stack it all up and do it.
In place, yeah.
The other thing is most people don't think past that point. You go, oh, I've just killed a 400-point knight with this. You've now got all these characters that most of these auras are a 12-inch or an 18-inch range to get it all stacked up, which means you've got all these really squishy characters now stood
Smack
12 to 18 inches away from the enemy army. So I don't see it as being... It's a niche thing where when it happens, you'll go, man, that was cool.
Yeah.
But building an army around it's just not going to be viable. Might from Beyond is +1 strength and attack, which is another really common good power. Psionic Blast is probably the one that you'll skip because it's just an average sort of smite style ability. And when you've got the other powers, Psychic Stimulus is advance and charge. Gene Stealers already get it, but it's great for things like Aberrants, which are a bit slow. And Mind Control's my favourite. So it's Warp Charge 7, pick an enemy unit within 12, so you do have to be right on the enemy's doorstep to do it. Roll 3 dice and add them together. If that number is equal to or greater than the target's leadership, you get to use it.
Oh, cool.
So you can either fight with one combat weapon or you can shoot all of its guns at an enemy unit. And when you grab a 600-point knight and then deliberately overcharge all of its guns to try and deal mortal wounds to itself because you don't care, and then point it at another unit and watch it vaporize a unit, that's kind of cool. The biggest problem with Mind Control is the range. It's also... I'm giving away a tip for the tournament, but because it becomes part of your unit for that activation, if there are enemy units within 1 inch of it, it can't fire. Because it becomes a model of your own.
Yeah.
If you're within 1 inch, you're not allowed to use shooting attacks. So you then force, in the example of a knight, just by keeping a unit of 10 guardsmen surrounding the knight within 1 inch of the knight, if you mind control that knight, the knight has to then choose the combat option, which means it stands on a guardsman, and you don't care. So mind control is one that it's a great power, but it's also easy to kind of get around if you know it's coming.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be another power that if you're going to run mind control, you want mass hypnosis or you want mental onslaught handy so that you can do other things with the Psyker. But yeah, the Magus is one that you should see in just about every army.
Yeah. Next one is Primus. So it's like the general, the military head of the cult.
Yep.
2 auras, both really good, both around combat.
Yeah, so he gets it's a +1 to hit aura from memory within 6 of him for the cult, which alone, when you start dealing with things like the -1 to hit weapons that the aberrants carry, offsetting that's really good. So yeah, it's within 6 and it's +1 to hit. You also then get reroll wound rolls of 1 made by friendly cult units that ambush, that have ambush while they're within 6 when targeting an enemy unit. So you pick an enemy unit at the start of the game, and they get reroll 1s as well. So it's quite common when you use the Brood Coven stratagem to give him... there's a Warlord trait that basically changes his auras from 6 to 9 to give him even more effect, which is great. So He's only 75 points. Most of these characters come in that sort of 40 to 60 point range. There's a couple that trip over it, but like my 3 HQs for this army are an Icon Ward, a Jackal Alphys, a Primus, and a Magus, and you're talking about 80, 70, 75, and 53 points respectively. Like, there's almost no points spent on my HQ, but I've got 4 of them.
Yeah.
Which is really awesome.
Cool.
Next one's the Icon Ward.
Yes. So these are first and second generation?
Yep, they're basically the big acolyte. They're the kind of the biggest, nastiest acolytes in the cult.
So they carry the cult banner into combat. They're the most powerful of the first and second generation hybrids.
What's really great is there's not a lot of armies that use banners anymore. The Imperial Guard do have a standard bearer, and there's a couple of them that lurk around. But when you look at this guy's profile for his 53, I think
53 points, yeah.
He's 4 attacks, 4 wounds, 3s to hit in combat. He's got a Rending Claw, like a Gene Stealer Claw, which is pretty decent. He's got unquestioning loyalty, but he's also a character, so he benefits from it both ways. He's got an aura that affects him.
Well, he's got 2 auras.
Yeah, so the Sacred Cult banner is reroll morale within 6 of this model. And then he's got... It's listed as 2 separate rules, but it's basically 1 rule. So it's Nexus of Devotion and Bestial Devotion. So Bestial Devotion lets you reroll 1s for aberrant units within 6 when they use Bestial Vigor, which is essentially like a Feel No Pain roll to stop them being hurt. Nexus of Devotion is giving them that Feel No Pain roll within 6, but it doesn't affect aberrants.
Yeah.
So it's kind of, if you're an aberrant, you get reroll 1s. If you're not an aberrant, you get Feel No Pain.
Yeah.
And that also affects him, obviously, so he's getting his own Feel No Pain aura.
But it's easy to... like a relic would give him a 3rd aura as well.
Yeah, so you can take the Standard of Devotion, I think is the... I can't think of the actual name for it now. It's got a particular relic name. Icon of the Cult Ascendant, which is add +1 strength to all friendly cult infantry and bike units within 6. So there's an instant additional aura that he can pick up. And then there's a couple of the Warlord traits that'll give him another aura, particularly if you go to Vigilus. Yep. There's other things that you can pick up for him that give him quite a number of effects. And if you do go Alien Majesty, like I just mentioned with the Primus, and increase all of these auras to 9 instead of 6, there's a lot to be said for that Icon Ward.
But the Icon Ward is a Brood Brother?
No.
Oh.
No, he's not a Brood Brother. He's cult.
Right. Maybe that's in another one that I've... wonder what I was thinking with that.
It doesn't affect Brood Brothers because all of his auras specify cult.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is probably what that reference means.
It's probably not.
Okay.
But that's okay. It'll make sense further on, I'm sure. Perhaps.
Fair enough.
Oh, actually, no. I think it's the Acolyte.
The Acolytes are cult as well.
Oh, man.
That's why I don't know what you've written for there. But it doesn't matter.
There was one. Oh, well, never mind.
Doesn't matter.
Oh, Neophyte.
No, they're cult as well.
No, because I had a question there. Why take Brood Brothers for the sake of 20 points?
Oh, okay. We'll come back to that in a minute. Go back to we've just finished the Icon Ward.
Oh, you know what? Okay, I've totally stuffed up. It's to do with the Brood Brother infantry squads. Never mind. I got there eventually. Sorry about that.
Fair enough. So yeah, Icon Ward, 53 points. Should almost be an auto include in most cult armies because between the Banner of +1 strength and the Feel No Pain for everyone within 6 and reroll 1s for Abominants within 6, and he's half decent in combat. He's not awesome, but he's good enough.
Yeah.
I think you'll see a lot of them. Like I've actually got 2 models for this. One's kit bashed and one's the official one. And I can see myself running 2 of them in bigger armies. Just to make sure I've got those auras across bigger parts of the army.
Yeah. So the next one is the Abominant.
He's new.
Yeah.
Suitably creepy looking model as well because the Abominants are these kind of... It's what happens when a birth goes wrong within the cult. So this thing's kind of got 2 faces that are smushed together and he's a big sort of hulking monstrosity. And he's basically an aberrant that the Patriarch goes and gives some extra love and attention to, psychically speaking, and makes it slightly more intelligent and bigger and stronger and faster and whatnot. His stat line is impressive.
So with the fluff and story that goes behind it, when something goes wrong with the spawning, instead of a hybrid, you get an aberrant.
Yep.
And the abominant is the leader of the aberrant.
Yeah.
And so they're bigger and stronger, but somewhat dim-witted.
Yeah. When he was, I think he was 80 points when they first released him in Tooth and Claw was when he was first released. Mm-hmm. He was definitely worth taking. At 105, he's a bit more questionable now. He's got a great stat line. Only 3 attacks, which kind of sucks. But the good part about him is he's got a rule called Chosen One. For every unmodified roll of 6 to hit made in the fight phase by an aberrant unit within 6, the model scores 2 hits instead of 1. Mm-hmm. Now, there's 2 parts of that are worth mentioning. It's an unmodified roll of 6, so it doesn't matter if you've got pluses to hit. Yep. It actually has to be a 6 on the dice.
Yes.
But secondly, it's you score 2 hits instead of 1 hit. Mm-hmm. Instead of it being make an extra attack, it's just an extra hit, which is a big deal. Because the aberrants, when we get to them, the basic aberrant has 4 attacks. So the chances of 5 of them getting a few 6s through can amp up the amount of hits they get really rapidly.
Yeah.
You really need to give this guy the Relic Warhammer to get rid of his -1 to hit, because then he hits on 3s and then he's -1 to hit with his basic weapon. So if he's only hitting on 4s with 3 attacks, it's kind of a bit... it's okay.
Yeah. So if you need to spend more for resources... Are you better off spending the extra, 20 points to get the Primarch?
Patriarch, yeah.
Oh my goodness, why do I keep calling him a Primarch?
It's literally 20 points difference to just go to a Patriarch.
Yeah.
The only reason I can think is if you're going to run a lot of aberrants, or you're going to run one of the Vigilist detachments, which is all around aberrants and an abominant, at which point you're getting enough buffs and things out of it to go, okay, yeah, it's worth going down that road.
Yep.
But yeah, it's for 105 points. If he was 90... I'd probably 90, 95 maybe. He'd probably be spot on. At 105, he's a little bit too expensive. Not by much. In your
opinion.
Well, yeah, I suppose in my opinion, but
that's why we're here, I guess.
Exactly.
Jackal Alphys.
I love this. This is my favourite model of the entire release. She's just cool, and it is a she. The model is a she. Mm-hmm. Not that you can tell that because she's bald. You actually look at the face. The facial features are definitely more feminine in that the jawline's narrower and so on. But because of the way she's holding this gigantic sniper rifle, you can't actually tell with her armour and the way she's sculpted that she's actually got boobs. So
Jackals are on bikes and quads?
Yep, they're the new biker range, which are so good.
And the Jackal Alphys is, as you said, female model, but it is the commander of the Jackals. She is the commander of the Jackals.
Yeah, so... it'd be really easy to make it into a male, literally with a head swap. You'd never know the difference. Because she's got so much gear on her. I really, really dig the model. It's one of my favourite models that they've done for this range. Really mobile, on a bike. One of the few characters that's above toughness 3 as well, because she's on a bike, so she's toughness 4. She's -1 to hit, which makes her a bit more durable, because she's only got a 5+ saving throw. But she shouldn't really be in any... sort of close proximity to the enemy because she's got a sniper rifle.
So, aura picks enemy and all friendlies get +1 to hit.
Yeah, she's got an aura called Target Priority Sighted. So at the start of your shooting phase, you pick an enemy within 36. Until the end of that phase, add 1 to the hit rolls for attacks by friendly cult units within 6. If they're bike units, it's actually within 12. And so that makes her aura, for bike units, she doesn't have to be in the thick of it.
Yeah. And because these models tend to be, further down the generation, so they tend to be more human, so they kind of got more human stats.
Yeah.
So having that +1
to hit is important.
A really good boost.
Yeah. She doesn't need it because she's already hitting on 2s. But the Jackals do, yeah.
Yeah. And as you said, she comes with a sniper.
Oh
my goodness, I'm doing really well today.
Yeah.
Sniper rifle. And that's, I guess, the first of many...
between her and the Sanctus and the Kellamorph, and the good thing about her rifle is it's -2 AP, it does D3 damage, and she can always target characters, and then she can deal a mortal wound when she rolls a 6 to wound. You can stack her with there's a relic that gives her +2 to wound, which is an interesting weapon because at that point it means if you roll a 4 or greater, you always deal a mortal wound.
Yeah.
So what you do, and this comes back to the Hive Cult we talked about a second ago with the stratagems. So you give her the relic sniper rifle, which I'm just going to get the name for it. It's Grandsires Blood, I believe. Oh no, this is Gift from Beyond. So you add 2 to the wound rolls.
Mm-hmm.
So she hits on 2s, and at this point, against anything she rolls a 4+4, she's dealing a mortal wound.
Yep.
So if you can get that wound off, and she's and she picks. So say for example, you want to target a knight, and you've got 3 Goliath rock grinders, which we'll talk about later on, which all have mining lasers. At the start of the shooting phase, you pick the knight as your target, and then she gives each of them +1 to hit when they shoot at it. So they're now hitting on 3s. She then fires first, and as long as she hits on 2s and wounds on 4s, she deals a mortal wound to the knight.
Yes.
The knight can't save it, he takes a wound. At which point you then pop the stratagem Chilling Efficiency for 2 command points. Use this stratagem after a Hive Cult unit, in this case the Jackal, has attacked an enemy unit in the shooting phase, which we've just done, and the attack has resulted in the enemy unit losing 1 or more wounds, which we've just done because the mortal wound ignores everything, it just does a wound. Add 1 to the hit rolls for attacks made by other friendly Hive Cult units that target the same unit this turn. So now you've got those 3 Goliath rock grinders that normally hit on 4s. They get +1 from her aura to hit on 3s, and they get another +1 from Chilling Efficiency to hit on 2s. So you've now got a 100-point vehicle with a D3 shot las cannon that wasn't really a threat to the knight.
But now
there's suddenly 3D3 of them shooting at him, hitting on 2s, and that's D6 damage and all the rest of it, and that starts being a bit worrying.
Yeah.
And because of that 6-inch aura that she has, and the way the vehicle squadrons work, it actually gets really scary if you go down the road of taking units of Ridge Runners, which, again, we'll talk about when we get to them in a second. But a lot of this army relies on these auras and combos to work, so you kind of have to reference them.
You have to know how they all interact and work together.
So it's definitely a combo army that you have to be willing to work through and figure out what does what.
And that's what we, when we were doing episode 35, it really is a strategic army. So you have to be able to think strategically, and that's, I guess, my takeaway from when we've been going and having a look at the codex as well, is that everything interacts together, and you need to work how to layer all of those up rather than just taking, well, this seems like an obvious choice, this seems like an obvious choice. You need to actually put a lot of strategic thinking.
There's so many combos in this book that everything's basically viable.
Yeah.
How viable can be a bit weird, but when you start stacking, like I've just said, you can take Ridge Runners and Goliath rock grinders with mining lasers with a Jackal, stack it with Hive Cult, and all of a sudden you've got a unit that costs 250 points and fires 3D3 las cannon shots hitting on 2s. That's actually quite dangerous. So it's definitely an army of those sorts of things. You have to think through it and plan it out.
Yeah.
One crazy idea I had was running 3 units of 3 Ridge Runners. Now they're 250, 750, it's probably 800 points, including the Jackal. So in a 2,000 point army, it's nearly half for 10 models. But because of the way the auras stack and because of the way her rules stack, you make her the Warlord, so she's got a 9-inch bubble rather than a 6. And then because they're vehicle squadrons, you only need 1 model in the squadron to be in range of her, so all 3 of them benefit.
Yeah.
So you get 9 of them getting those buffs all of a sudden instead of 3, and pick a target and watch it disappear because you put so many shots into it.
Yeah.
So I really like the Jackal. She's, apart from being a good model, she has a lot to give to the shooting side of the army. Not so much in the combat side, but she's definitely helps the cult shoot.
Yeah.
But you need the cult keyword.
Which brings me into the troops, which the Broodbrother Infantry Squad is next.
Yep.
Which is basically an Imperial Guard unit that with squads up to 20.
Yep. Which is its biggest selling point because the Guard squads only come in 10s. And
now you suggested that you think that we'll see a lot of these in competitive armies because basically they're so cheap.
Yeah.
93 points gets you 20 models with 2 grenade launchers and
a mortar. I think you'll either see them in just basic squads of 10 where they're 40 points, or you might see them with 10 plus a mortar where they're 47 points, I think now. But because they're cheap and they fill out the troop slots, it means that you can spend the minimum possible on the troops to then get all the cool stuff in the rest of the army.
Yeah.
But they are basically just Guard with +1 leadership. the biggest problem for me is the neophytes, which is the next unit on the list.
Yeah.
The neophytes are essentially 1 point more for a basically comparable stat line.
Yeah, so it's basically the same profile as the Brood Brothers.
Yep.
But slightly different weapons.
Well, yeah, you still get the flamer and grenade launcher option. You also get a Weber, which is another option in the box set.
Yeah.
And then you trade out the guard heavy weapons for mining weapons, the mining laser and the seismic cannon. But more importantly, you get the cult keyword.
Yeah. So it's 1 extra point per model.
Yep.
Gets you that cult keyword.
And for me, that's the biggest selling point here, because they can then be affected by the Jackal's special rules. They can be affected by the Feel No Pain that you get from the Nexus of Devotion on the Icon Ward. They will get +1 to their armor save if they're Rusted Claw, or they will get 6 up Invulnerable save if they're Bladed Cog. You know, there's a lot of benefits there depending on the creed you pick.
So let's say maximum is 20.
Yeah, there's squads of 10 to 20.
Why would you take the Brood Brothers for the sake of 20 points?
I think over the course of, if you're going to go this way and go a horde of them, if you take 6 units of 20, it's not 20 points anymore, it's 120 points. You also, there is something to be said for taking them with mortars and stuff, because it gives you that all the guard weapons have a longer range. So there's definitely reasons to take Brood Brothers, but I think that for me, I really like the fact that all the auras and stuff, even like getting +1 strength on them for close combat doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
But it takes them from strength 3 to strength 4, which means if I'm charging Guardians or Guardsmen or other Brood Brother squads, I'm winning them on 3s now.
Yeah.
So giving them Feel No Pain, giving them +1 to hit, all those other sort of things mean that you can take a basic unit and make them strength 4 or strength 5 with 2 attacks each, or cast Might from Beyond on them and watch a squad of them all of a sudden go from 20 attacks to 40 attacks at strength 5, and then +1 to hit, they're hitting on 3s. You know, it's a lot of that. Again, it comes back to those combos and things. So I still think you'll see an awful lot of Brood Brothers, but for me, I mean, I've got 10, 20, 30, 40, probably 50 neophytes in the house. Most of them are mechanized at the moment, but I can see builds where this becomes squads of 20 looking for those stacked buffs to kind of sit at that 12 to 18 inch range sweet spot for the unit, and not being worried about being charged by the average units. They actually can hold their own and defend themselves.
Yeah.
So yeah, I quite like them. What's even more interesting though is the power ratings. So you pay 4 power for 10 of them, and then you add 2 more to bring them up to 20 if you're playing power.
Yeah.
If you're looking down that road for ITC and those sorts of things, it keeps the power rating down. So you're not paying a penalty there if you're playing ITC compared to Brood Brothers, which are, again, low-powered.
Yeah.
Whereas Acolytes, which is the next unit we're going to talk about, the power rating goes up quite rapidly because they start at 3, but it's only 5 models. So when you crank them up, they then crack the 7 power number, which for some of the secondaries in ITC is actually a factor.
Yeah.
So
the next model is Acolytes.
So these are the first and second generation hybrids.
Yep. 7 point base points for the model. They are close quarter combat models. Pistols, knives, claws.
Yep, all pretty standard. They're basically baby gene stealers.
Yeah, we talked about the flamer bomb in episode 35. We talked about the ambush.
The 1 point upgrade from their auto pistol to a hand flamer makes them an 8 point model. They used to be, I think it was 13, including a hand flamer, and the hand flamer went from, in the index it was only D3 shots, now it's D6 shots, and they cost 5 points less. Yeah. So taking, like, I've got a squad of 10 that I'll run. Yeah. Because I've got them built and assembled, and that's just a happy coincidence. Taking 20 of them, though, you can spend... You can actually combo it out and spend 5 command points on them. So you spend 2 command points for lying in wait, which lets you deploy them 3 inches from the enemy, which means that their 6-inch flamer weapons aren't an issue because they're going to be in range. Yep. You then spend 3 more command points on perfect ambush, which means that you can shoot them in the movement phase when you deploy them. So they drop in, 20 of them, roll 20 d6 shots in the movement phase that auto hit, and then in the shooting phase, do 20 more d6 shots that auto hit. So if you ever needed to clear a screen, and it's, you know, a big unit of 30 cultists or something, and the first 20 d6 shots you don't think is going to be enough, you can go, cool, I'm going to dump 40 d6 shots into them. Yeah. And look, clever opponents will just remove the models that are in range within that first 6-inch range, so you can't shoot them a second time. So it'll be a pick and choose moment, but if there's multiple units in range, then yeah, I think that's for 5 command points. It's expensive, but it'll do work.
Yeah.
These are very much the mining units as well.
Yeah, so there's 3 different mining weapons, and 2 and 5 can have mining weapons.
Yep. So the rock cutter, the rock drill, and the rock saw. Mm-hmm. Internet wisdom is the rock saw because it's 10 points and it's a decent weapon.
Yep.
And then the cutter's a little bit more expensive and the drill's a little bit more expensive again. I had an argument with one of our local GSC players. I actually don't reckon any of them are worth taking.
Yeah.
Only because you're paying 10 points for a rock saw. You can have up to 8 of them in a squad of 20.
Yeah.
They're 7-point models. So you're paying 10 points to give it to a 7-point model that's got a guardsman stat line, defensively speaking, that loses an attack when you do it because you lose your cultist knife, which is a free attack for every model.
Yeah.
And you're taking, if you spent those 80 points on those 8 rock saws, you get 11 more acolytes.
Yeah.
So you almost get 50% more attacks, albeit with only rending claws than the rock saws. And my gut feeling is if I go and work out the maths for it, unless you're fighting something like a knight where the strength 8 is actually relevant, I reckon the claws are actually, the volume is more important than the saw itself.
Yeah.
I've got no data to back that with because I haven't done
the maths on it.
But I've actually been mulling that over when I've been building my own army, going, is it actually worth taking any of these weapons?
Yeah. And the difference that the 80 points
for the extra models.
Yeah.
So I might have to do a whole article on that, working that out, because I think as soon as you give them the strength buff from the icon, so make them +1 strength, so strength 5, they're wounding a knight on a 5, not a 6 at that point, whereas the saws go from wounding on a 4 to a 3, but I've now got twice the attacks.
Yeah.
I actually think that'll close the gap again.
Well, how strong is the attack?
So the strength 4 with the rending claws, strength 8 with the saw.
See, well, there you go. You kind of need to do twice the amount.
Yeah.
In order to get the same.
Well, it depends. Again, it depends on what the target's toughness is, and there's a few variables there. And again, the buffs, anything that buffs the rock saw to make it better against a knight, will, by virtue of the rules, make it better, even if you don't have a rock saw. So I've got to go through and actually work out,
have a look at that,
how the numbers pan out. But in my head, paying 17 points for a toughness 3, 1 wound, 5 up save model. Like, I won't do that in my Elder armies. Like, I don't want to do it in my Horde army. So, I know that I'm very, very much in the minority there because
these aren't as squishy, are they? They're a little.
No, they're exactly like neophytes.
Okay.
Toughness 3, 1 wound, 5 up saves. They're.
Yeah. Okay.
I object to the 17 points.
Spending 17 points on something that's so easy.
It's the same as to kill as a 4-point brood brother. So, I get where people are coming from for their damage. I do.
Yeah,
I can see that. I object. Like if they were 5 points a saw, absolutely, you wouldn't even blink. But I think the drill's like 17 points for a drill, and at that point, you're paying 20 plus points for a model. It's just too expensive. So the drill, where is it? So the drill is 17 points, the cutter is 12, and the rock saw is 10.
Yeah.
So 24 points for that model with a drill. My Dark Reapers for my Eldar are a little bit more than that, and they are toughness 3, but they're 3 up armor, not 5 up. And I'm shooting you from 48 inches, not having to cross the board and get you in combat. So for that price, I just think they're too expensive. Anyway.
Having said that, the Acolytes are a model that you have a lot of time for.
Oh, yeah.
The dollar factor is actually going to be the biggest restriction.
Yeah.
Basically because they work out to be about $1 a point.
Well, they're actually worse than that.
Yeah. I know you said you wanted to build an army with about 120 of them. Yeah,
which 6 units of 20 at 140 points a unit sounds so good.
Yeah.
And then I looked at how much I think they're 70 or 77, I forget which here in Australia, for 5.
Yeah.
So you're literally paying more than $1 per point for those units that are 140 points. And even if you give them, the box only comes with 1 of each of the special weapons. So if you went, okay, I'm going to take I had to buy 4 boxes.
Yep.
And I'm going to take 4 rock drills and 4 rock cutters, which are the most expensive. So you're paying 17 times 4 plus 12 times 4 plus the 140 points. You're going to spend another 10 points on the banner, which is an upgrade for the squad, and you're going to spend it on the Lash Whip and Bone Sword, and you're going to give everyone hand flamers. You might come close to $1 per point.
Yeah, but if you just go
The raw dudes,
120 of them at 7 points each, you're at 840 points for $1,500.
yeah. And that's a really hard pill to swallow.
Yeah, it is. You're right.
There's a reason I only have 30 acolytes in the house. And most of those are the overkill monopose ones that came from the cheap boxes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I could easily see a big massed acolyte army being a thing. But I think without overkill to buy, where you used to, I think you got 22 in overkill.
Yeah.
And you also got aberrants in it, and you got neophytes in it, and you got the brood coven in it. Like, it was worth buying for that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you're going to see 100 plus acolytes as good as it would be on the table.
Yep.
Since we've covered HQ and troops, should we take a quick break? Because we're an hour into this part, so we're going to do a part 2 segment in just a second in the same episode.
But just so that we don't accidentally lose all of.
Yep.
The
So
last.
I can save it all for editing, and you guys can pause the episode if you need to take a quick break yourselves.
And I can go and get something to eat because I'm starving.
We'll be back in just a second. All right, so part 2. Now we've had a quick break and drink and refresher. Let's start.
Eating something.
Yep.
Way past lunchtime.
Trying to record it in the day is interesting.
Yes.
Elites.
Elites, yes. So
We're gonna kind of caption these a little bit.
Yeah, there are 3 elite choices.
There's more than 3. There's 9.
Oh, what have I got here? Well, I'm going to talk about 3 at the moment.
There's 3 on that
There's
page.
3 on this particular bit that I want to look at.
Most of these are characters.
Oh,
I'll
right.
add.
Sorry, yeah. Okay, so Metamorphosis.
The hybrid metamorphs are basically, as the High Fleet gets closer, the acolytes start taking on Tyrannid likenesses. They get like weird facial things and tentacles, and they start getting a bit messed up.
Yep.
They're basically better acolytes. They're 2 points more expensive. They get an extra attack, and you can actually stack them out. So if you hand them a bunch of the metamorph talent upgrades, you can get them out to about 5 attacks each, hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s. Great screen clearers. A little bit expensive, and they only go to units of 10. If you could take units of 20 like you can with acolytes, then I might actually see them as being, worth their points. But at 10 of them, it's by the time you get them where they need to be, or put the resources into ambush to make them start where they need to be, there's only 10 of them.
Yeah.
With 20, I'd say they would be a thing. At 10, they're good, but they're not like must-haves.
Yeah. Sledgehammer unit.
The aberrants.
Aberrants.
Yep. I really like the aberrants. I've got 12, I think. 10 in this army, because it's up to 10. I have to convert 2 because they added a squad leader, and mine are the old single part or multi-part, the quick build ones from Overkill. So they've now got a hypermorph character, which is 1 per 5 in the squad, which is great.
Yep.
What's interesting about them is a lot of people will take the power hammers. Don't. The picks are actually really good, because the picks, when you read the rules, say each time a model with a rending claw makes an attack with this weapon, and all of them have rending claws, make an additional attack with its rending claw. So it's got 2 attacks base, and it swings its pick twice. That means it gets 2 attacks with its rending claws as well. So they're 4 attacks.
With 2 attacks with its rending claw as well, or 2 attacks with its rending claw and 1 with the pick?
No. So it says
it again?
each time a model with a rending claw, which it has, makes an attack with this weapon, make an additional attack with its claw. So it's got 2 attacks on its profile.
Ah, okay, right. Yeah.
You declare 2 with the pick.
Yep.
And then you get 2 with the claw as well.
Yep.
So they're 4 attacks each in that regard. They're base strength 5, -2 AP and D3 damage. So they're pretty solid in terms of output for most things. And again, if you give them Might from Beyond, you make them strength 6 and 3 attacks, which means you actually get 6 attacks.
Yeah.
Whereas if you go with the hammer, you only get your 2 attacks. There's no rending claw buff, and they're -1 to hit. So even though they go to strength 10, they're less accurate,
Yeah.
which is a problem. With the hypermorph, you've got two options for it. It's either a heavy power hammer, like I've just mentioned, or the heavy improvised weapon, which in the box is a signpost. It's pulled out of the ground. It's got a lump of concrete on one end and a sign on the other.
Yeah.
I have to convert two of these because it gets a tail. So it starts with 3 base attacks and it gets a 4th attack with its tail. But the heavy improvised weapon is for every time you attack with it, you roll 2 dice instead of 1. So its base 3 attacks become 6 attacks.
Yeah.
So it gets 6 attacks with its sign, 1 attack with its tail, and then if you've got an abominant nearby where 6s to hit become 2 hits instead of 1, it starts to stack out really quickly with a couple of these. And the best thing is the heavy improvised weapon is still strength 10, neg 1, and a flat 2 damage. So it's still a dangerous weapon, but it's only neg 1 instead of neg 3 like the hammer.
Yep.
So yeah, I really love aberrants. I think running them in an anointed throng vigilist attachment, which we're not going to cover today, is really good. And I think if you're going to run more than one squad of them, you have to take an abominant for that exploding 6s rule.
Yeah.
There's actually a strat in here as well from memory that lets you explode 6s if you're the right hive cult. I'm just going to very quickly look up which cult it is because I remember reading it going, oh, that's kind of fun. Twisted Helix. So if they're Twisted Helix, they're now strength 6 because of the cult creed. Use this stratagem at the end of the fight phase. Select a aberrant unit. That unit can immediately fight again. So it actually gets to fight twice, which you've already strength 6. You can get +1 from the banner to make them strength 7, +1 from Might Beyond, strength 8. The Biophagus, which we'll talk about in a second, has another roll that can push them out to strength 9 with multiple attacks. And all of a sudden this unit goes in and goes, cool, here's 2, 3, 4, 8 attacks a model at strength 8 or 9. Like, it just blends things. So it's really, again, it's another one of those, if I want to stack it out, you can turn them into these big monster units.
Yeah.
So I really like the aberrants. The multi-part kits are really nice as well because you do get some variety because mine are all monopose.
Yeah.
So, but I'm going to convert 2 of them to the heavy weapons just because I don't want to go and buy a box to make them.
For the set, yeah. Next is the Gene Stealers.
Yeah, pure strains.
They're 15 points a model, and in your opinion, overpriced.
Yeah, so they're 3 points more than a Tyrannid Gene Stealer from the Tyrannid Codex. These are elites, not troops, which means they don't get objective secured like the Tyrannid ones do. You're basically spending 3 points to get Cult Ambush is essentially what you're paying for. Because other than that, you still get Lightning Reflexes, you still get Swift and Deadly, you still get Flurry of Claws. You can't, because they're pure strains, you can't get like Toxin Sacks and Acid Maws and stuff that the Tyrannid ones can get, which is a shame. To be honest, I think denying them the Cult Creeds makes sense because you don't want to have these things walking around. Like making them Bladed Cog and giving them a 4-up invulnerable save is a bit dumb. I reckon if you'd given them... So I've got a rule called Flurry of Claws, which says add 1 to their attacks characteristics. So they go from 3 attacks to 4, whilst this unit contains 10 or more models. What they should have just done is deleted that rule and just given them 4 attacks base all the time. And if you'd done that... So even if there's 1, it's still 4 attacks. That at that point for 15 points, I think is probably justified. But as it stands now, when you can take 2 Acolytes for the price of 1 Gene Stealer, it's you're trading strength's the same, weapon skill's the same. You're going from 3 attacks to 4 with claws plus 2 knife attacks. You are losing speed and an invul save, but you're getting 2 wounds, not 1. So the 2 Acolytes is actually probably better.
You get an extra point.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've still got a bunch of Gene Stealers and I'll still run them, but they're probably not the competitive choice, not when you've got other options in this book.
Yeah.
So the rest of these are all independent characters.
Medals. Yep. And so there's Clamavus.
Yep, so the Clamavus it's the model I least liked of the new model range, but it's the model that you want in the army because he's basically the street preacher. He stands on the corner with a loud hailer telling everyone how awesome the cult is. The big thing for him is his Proclamator Hailer, which is +1 to leadership within 6 for the same cult unit. But it also adds +1 to advance and charge rolls within 6, which is the reason you want it. So you deep strike him in with another unit that you want to charge with, like Aberrants. So instead of needing a 9 on 2d6 to get the charge, you now need an 8 on 2d6 to get the charge. He's got another rule called Scrambler Array, which messes about with enemy deep strike, which is okay, but you take him for that +1 to charge, almost exclusively. He's a very, like, he's not a combat character. He's a nothing in terms of, he's a corner preacher. If he gets tagged by anything remotely decent in combat, he's probably just going to die. But you only need him there for one turn, just to make everything charge.
Yeah.
And he's only about 55 points, I think he is. So he's not terribly expensive.
Next one, Locus.
The Locus is the bodyguard character. 40 points, so really cheap.
So yeah, he's a bodyguard for other more important characters.
Yeah, so he's got Unquestioning Loyalty, but he's also got a rule called Unquestioning Bodyguard, which is essentially a better version of Unquestioning Loyalty, because Unquestioning Loyalty slays the enemy, slays the unit that uses it.
Yep.
So you just lose the model. Whereas his rule is he takes mortal wounds instead, so he can actually take more hits for a character than a typical Genestealer comp model. And he's decent in combat. He's got a decent number of attacks. He's got a decent weapon. And again, for 40 points, and his heroic intervention rules means that he can stave off low-level characters or even push like the Imperial Assassins that come in looking for combat.
Yeah.
He's probably not going to win, but he's going to hold them off. So he's a pretty decent character. I quite like him. The model's really brooding, which I like as well. It's probably the only model here I don't have, though, because it's not a priority for me to add to an army.
The next model, I actually was just trying to have a quick scan over the codex to try and work out what my notes possibly meant.
The Sanctus?
Yeah, so it's Sanctus, and I've written other EP. What do you think EP might mean?
I don't know. That's a very good question.
So I've written other EP and then
other
Assassin.
Episode. We talked about him a lot in the other episode.
Oh, that's what I meant. Yes.
Jesus. When you can't read your own shorthand, that's entertaining.
There's a lot of notes here, okay?
Yes, the Sanctus is the sniper or character assassin. You'll see him most of the time with a sniper rifle because he's an easy plug-in with a gun that works against psychers. I said to someone else, if you take the Biodagger and then take the Relic Biodagger upgrade, he's 5 points cheaper. He's only 55 points at that stage. You use Perfect Ambush because he's got that built in for 0. And then he's actually a decent sort of charging assassin where you can go in and pick out... The sniper rifle's okay for killing psychers, but that's kind of all it is. If he goes in with a 2 damage weapon that's 5 attacks, wounding on 2s, hitting on 2s, with rerolls, he can take out mid-level characters in a round of combat for 55 points. He's pretty good in that regard. I haven't tried that yet, but I want to try it. So he also comes with a familiar that's lurking on a drain pipe, which is just cool because it's actually got its own night vision goggle with one lens because it's only got one eye.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I like him a lot. Not as much as the next one, though.
So the next one, I kind of have a bit of a mental picture of Clint Eastwood.
Yes.
This character. Very much ask yourself one question and, did I shoot 5 or 6?
6 bullets, yep.
So it's the Kelemorph.
Yeah, the Kelemorph at the moment is an interesting position because you can only get him out of the Kill Team box at the moment. He's not a standalone miniature. So you have to go and buy the $110 Australian Kill Team box. Admittedly, you do get a $70 box worth of acolytes in that and a set of terrain. So he's probably $30, give or take, which is about where $40 where most of the characters sit. He's got a great rule with Gunslinger, so he gets to fire all 3 of his guns because he has 3 arms.
Yes.
And every time he gets a kill, he gets another shot. So he can, instead of shooting 6 times, he can actually shoot 12. And as soon as he kills something, he also gives rerolls. Is it rerolls or buffs? Reroll hit rolls of 1 for all friendly units within 6. So he is the epitome of the lone gunslinger who comes into town to save the downtrodden mining cult from the evil Imperium and then disappearing without a trace back into the hive. So for 60 points, he's amazingly good. He can target characters. It's 2 damage weapons, and he's got 6 shots, up to 12 if he keeps hitting. He's definitely a very common unit I would expect in most armies. I've got one sat over there that I bought through a deal where someone...
Sure, he's just trying to make sure. No, I didn't buy the Kill Team
The box isn't here.
The box isn't here. The box isn't here.
The Kelemorph is. But yeah, he's definitely... I actually think I prefer him to the Sanctus because he doesn't need to engage up close like the Sanctus would if you go with a knife, but he's got the shots to do what the Sanctus does. And you can still drop him in at 12 inches, use perfect ambush to shoot twice, and then all of a sudden he shoots 24 times, hitting on 2s potentially.
Yeah.
So he's pretty brutal in that regard. I really like him. 60 points. He's a bargain.
Yeah. I actually really like this next model as well. I like the sculpt of
Oh,
it.
yeah. The Nexus.
For the Nexus, yeah. And I love the fact that he's got the floating table with the map of the GW
Nottingham head office. Yeah.
It's really cool.
It's a beautiful model. It's a very clever model. He's probably going to be seen in just about every Insular Cold Army because I think he's only 40 or 50 points again.
He's got the special rule to be the coordinator.
Well, he's the one that lets you move blips around at the start of the game, and he regenerates command points.
Yeah.
So for his very low price,
he's worth it, even if it's just to regenerate those command points.
And he's the first model you reveal from your blips, so that any command points you spend on the blips, you then get a chance to get back. So I suspect the Nexus will be something that you see very regularly. You won't see more than one. I don't think there's any point in having more than one, but well, he's not good in combat or anything, and you can't stack his rules.
No, but it's just so that you have the ability to continue to regenerate those command points, because is it the first 3 turns you need to be able to use them?
Well, most of the stratagems and stuff affect the way ambush works, which is where you'll want the most command points. But he gets buffs if you've got Primuses and Clamavises and other characters as well. But you only need one of him to get all those benefits. Yeah. I think he's just one of those ones that after about turn 2 or turn 3, you won't really care. He'll be sat on an objective at the back of the table, just being there. Yeah,
and just cultivating those command points, really. Last one of these single models is the Biophagus.
Yep.
Mad Doctor.
Yeah, it's a cool model. He's literally dressed up in surgical gown and a big goad and covered in vials and test tubes and stuff. His little familiar is probably my favourite familiar.
I love the familiar, yeah.
With its mad scientist goggles and the beaker of fluid. He's basically an upgrade for aberrants.
Yes.
His sole purpose is to make aberrants better. Mm-hmm. So you roll a dice, and you can either get +1 strength, +1 attack, or +1 toughness.
And he's pretty cheap.
I think he's 35 points. I want to say he's 35.
Which, for the benefits of the upgrades to the aberrants.
Yeah. I mean, his base 35.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming his weapons will all be zeros because that's kind of the way these work. The injector goes to 0. So yeah, he's 35 points. And you can have a 12-point familiar with him as well if you want it.
What does the familiar do other than just looking cute?
So it does actually have rules. All of the familiars in this, because your Patriarch can take 2 familiars, your Magus can take 2, the Sanctus has 1. All of them have a combat profile, so they can actually fight. And the 2 attacks strength 4 with Rending Claws. Like, they're actually decent in combat most of the time. The Alchemical Familiar doesn't have Rending Claws, but it's still 2 attacks at strength 4. During the once per game, when he uses the D6 roll, the D3 roll, you roll twice and you pick which one you want. So it lets you manipulate what you actually get. Yeah. But the good part about him is he's essentially an extra wound that you can take on the Biophagus, and it's the same with the Sanctus's familiar 2 attack. The Sanctus's 2 attacks, strength 4. And the same with when you move over to the actual familiars that are separate bases, like on the Magus and the Patriarch. They actually get their own profile. Mm-hmm. So you can't target them because they're characters, but the first big mega death shot that gets past all their defenses, you can guarantee that familiar's taking it to the face rather than the character. But that's essentially the elites. There's no bad choices there. You're actually spoiled for choice as elites. And I can easily see those bigger armies being 3 detachments and like a double battalion and then a vanguard. So you can go back into the elites and just pick all the elites you want. The biggest problem you have is you will want multiple detachments because you want 2 or 3 Calamorphs and you want 2 or 3 Sanctus. So, the elites, you are spoiled for choice in the elite section.
Next section is fast attack.
Yep.
So we start out with Scout Sentinels.
Yep. It's a Brood Brothers Imperial Guard unit. It's basically the same unit you get from the Astra Militarum. Same scout rules, same everything. In my opinion, there's not a lot of point in taking them because for the same price, you get an Armoured Sentinel.
Yep.
And the Armoured Sentinel has a better defensive profile. It doesn't have the scouting rule, but you can't use that while you're a blip. So, for me, it's it's probably not ever worth doing because you're having to give up the deployment shenanigans to use the scout rule. The other thing with the cult armored sentinels is you can get plasma cannons, which you can't get on the scout ones.
Yeah.
So
They the same price?
yeah, same base price. All the weapons are the same price. The only difference is you're trading a 9-inch move down to an 8 for the armored.
Okay.
But you're gaining +1 toughness.
Yeah.
You're going from toughness 5 to toughness 6.
Yeah.
You're also going from a 4-up save on a scout sentinel to a 3-up save on the armored, but then you're losing the scout vehicle rule. So you are literally gaining a more durable, harder to kill unit. And you give it an autocannon or a las cannon. Mine have got autocannons on them.
Yeah.
And it's 6 wounds, toughness 6, 3-up armor save that can shoot 48 inches. You park it on an objective at the back of the deployment zone and leave it there.
Yeah.
And you just, particularly if you can put it in cover, that's even better. You have to then come and try and dig it out.
Yeah.
So for 40 points with an autocannon, it's a real steal.
Next up, jackals.
Yep, the Atalan jackals. We talked a little bit about this with the Cult Ambush episode because we were talking about their extra demo charges and the Rusted Claw stratagem, which kind of stacks on stacks.
Yeah.
Because you can get these guys down to throwing 5 demo charges, hitting on 2s because of the Rusted Claw rules, and then obviously stacking it with a Jackal Alphas as well.
Yeah. So but they've got lots of combos.
Oh yeah, like the fact that you can you start with an auto pistol. What do you get? You get an auto pistol on blasting charges, and then you have to take 2 extra weapons. And most people are suggesting taking a shotgun and a cultist knife. The cultist knife is an extra attack. The shotgun gives them a good shooting attack. Taking a second auto pistol is completely viable because you can still shoot 2 pistols on a bike, apparently. They're a skirmish unit, and if you're taking them as Rusted Claw, it makes sense to take the shotguns because the shotguns are an assault weapon, and that leverages off the Rusted Claw rules. They're 10 points each as well, which is so good.
So they're nice and cheap, and they look really cool, and they're.
But the problem again with that unit is that for Australia it's a $90 box.
Yeah.
And you pay 10 points
so
a
nice
jackal.
and cheap for the points.
Yeah.
Not nice and cheap for the models.
Well,
We really do have to clarify points versus dollars.
you get 4 jackals and a wolf quad.
Yeah.
Which the 4 jackals will be 40 points.
Yeah.
And if you spend the points to give them the grenade launchers and stuff, they might be 50 points, maybe even 60. 1, 2, 3. Oh, yeah, sort of 60-ish points is what they're going to end up to be for those 4. The wolf quad's a base of 15 points, and then you give them a heavy weapon. So you're spending $90 on a box of 5 models. That's not going to be 90 points.
Yeah.
And these squads go up to 12 bikes and 3 quads.
Yeah.
So you're spending $270 on a unit that in Australia, which is going to be all of. If you max it out, you might make 220, 230 points, which is just, I mean, this is one of the better value bike boxes, to be honest, because a lot of the bike boxes are $70 for 3. This is 90 for 5. And the way you build this army is you want to build big squads.
Yeah.
So it's the reason I don't have any at the moment. It's just too expensive to invest in doing them at the moment.
Yeah.
They're definitely worth investing in. The wolf quad is worth noting as well because they're 4 wounds. And even if you take them with just the heavy stubber, so they're I think they're 18 points with the heavy stubber, the game operates in D3s and D6s.
Yes.
4 wounds means that if you take a 3 damage weapon, you have to put another hit in to kill that wolf quad.
Yeah.
4 is a tipping point for the wounds cycle of weapons. So it's actually a really good way of soaking hits for the squad if you just want cheap ablative wounds.
Yeah.
Because it can't have demo charges. And the way I'd run them is Rusted Claw is a bunch of demo charges.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really like this unit. And again, running 36 of them with 9 wolf quads, $700-800.
Holy pachinga, Batman.
But it'd look amazing. Anyway.
Next fast attack is Ridge Runner.
Yeah, these are actually a lot
Scout
smaller
buggies.
than I expected. They're about the size of a land speeder or a duck hilder venom is actually a good comparison. The stock loadout with a mining laser and flare launchers is 84 points, and you can make them cheaper than that by taking the other weapons. If they ignored the penalty for moving and shooting with heavy weapons, they'd be worth 84 points. Yeah. As it stands now, they're another one of those units that either needs a points decrease or you need to stack them out using the Jackal and the right hives, the hive cult to actually get the extra buffs to hit.
Yeah.
They have the scout vehicle rule as well, but I don't know why you'd ever use the scout vehicle rule because you want them as blips.
Yeah.
And you can't ambush, like you can't subterranean them because they're vehicles.
Yeah.
The one buff I do like, they've got you pick between a spotter, a survey augury, and a flare launcher. The spotter gives 6 inches of extra range to their weapons. It's okay. The survey auger means you don't get cover against their weapons. Okay. Mm-hmm. The flare launcher, which is the default option, is the cheapest of the three, and it gives your vehicle feel no pain because it's a decoy launcher. And it also means that once per game you can select a biker unit within 6 that automatically gets a free 6 inches advance. Mm-hmm. So again, you stack that with Rusted Claw, and you've got a unit of bikes that moves 20 inches without taking the penalties for moving and shooting. Yeah. So there's a lot of synergy in that regard with the Ridge Runners. So I suspect, again, you have to build... If you're going to run Ridge Runners, you can't just run them because they have mining lasers. You have to stack them out to make sure they do what you need them to do. Yeah. My Ridge Runners will get runners... Hive Cult at the moment until I get Jackals, and at that point I'll start running them as Rusted Claw. So yeah, but look, fast attack, the Armored Sentinels, it's only really the Scout Sentinels that I wouldn't take, and the Ridge Runners are niche, but the other two are worth taking.
Yeah.
Heavy support?
Into heavy support, so I'm just very aware that we've probably got 15 minutes to get the heavy support and transports
we'll be
and
fine.
Fortification knocked off, so I'm just setting that expectation now. So there are 2 Broodbrother units.
Yep.
One is the Broodbrother Heavy Weapon Squad.
Yep, which is a copy-paste out of the Astra Militarum Codex, so it's 3 squads of heavy weapons. Mm-hmm. 3 bases of heavy weapons in a squad. The most common will be 3 mortars, 39 points. 3 mortars, and it's a heavy support choice. It's a great way of filling out a brigade because you need to have 3 heavy supports in the brigade, so you can do it for 120 points. The other 2 options are over 100 points each. Yeah. So if you just need... And if I had the mortared models, I'd probably try and run a brigade rather than what I'm running for skulls, but I just don't have the models. Because it just makes sense for the command points. Yeah. But they're not bad. Like I think it'll be really common to see 9 mortars in most Genestealer Cult armies just because of that reason alone. Yeah. 3 units of 3 and be done with it. But again, if you buy the proper mortar teams from Games Workshop, it's $50 for a 13-point base of mortars. So the good part about the Ridge Runners when you buy them is if you build them with the mining laser or the missile launcher, and you build them with the mining laser, you get a mortar. That's the 3rd weapon option on the back of the Ridge Runner. Yeah. And there's a kneeling crewman that sits on the back of the Ridge Runner. So you take the kneeling crewman, don't put him on the Ridge Runner, take the mortar, put them on a base, and then take one of the crew from your Goliath rock grinders or your Goliath trucks and put him on the base as well, because there's 2 models in the mortar on a 60mm base. It's an instant mortar from just spare crewmen that you get on the vehicles. If you want to put the crew on the vehicles or you want to magnetize the guns, fair enough, I get that. Yeah. For me, I'll save the money and build them that way. Yeah. Anyway.
The next heavy support is the Cult Lehman Russ, which is the Blood Brother tank. It is important to note that not all Lehman Russ variants can be used.
Yep, you get the Eradicator, the Exterminator, the Vanquisher, and the Stock Russ. You don't get the Demolisher, you don't get the Punisher, and you don't get the Executioner, which are the 3 you want.
They sound like WWF wrestlers.
The Eradicator, the Punisher. Ironically, the guns that you get are the sort of the stock heavy bolter, the stock heavy Lehman Russ tank weapons, and you don't get the ones you want, which means that most people...
You don't get the ones you would want.
Yeah. I said at the start of the episode, I'm talking from a competitive player's point of view. If you're going to run the Russes, you either run them dirt cheap, bog stock, as your heavy supports, they're about 150 points each, and they're decent tanks. If you're going to want to run them, the good variants, you're actually better off running them as a Supreme Command allied detachment of Astra Militarum, which, because of the Genestealer Cult rules, gives them the Broodbrother keyword. And then you're getting the better ballistic skill, you're getting the tank variants you want. Yes, they're more expensive, but you're actually getting efficient tanks at that point, which is where I think most Cult Russes will end up. I don't think you'll see them taken as heavy support. I think you'll see them taken as Astra Militarum, because you also then get tank orders and all sorts of stuff. Yeah. So, yeah.
So the next one is the Goliath Rock Grinder.
I love the model.
spoke about. Yeah.
I showed this to a friend of mine who's a miner. And
last night.
Yep.
Yeah.
And he laughed and went, "You know that can't mine shit, don't you?" And I went,
It doesn't
"Yeah, I know that.
need to. It's just
Yeah,
a
this
game.
is 40K. You know this."
Yeah.
And he's laughed and gone, "Yeah, but like they've never seen a mine site, have they?" I went, "Probably not."
So this is, it's a mining truck. It's got a good range of weapons. It's good in close combat, 110 points or less depending on the gun. And it has the keyword, whereas the Lehman Russ doesn't.
Yeah, and the keyword's the important part there because you
I thought
can.
you were going
then-
to show me the.
Well, I
Can't find it now.
Well, I found the picture of the Goliath truck, but not the
That's okay.
not the rock grinder specifically.
All right, what have you got to say about the rock grinder?
So there's the rock grinder there for your reference with the big drilly things on the front.
Yes.
It's toughness 7, which is an important thing because most of the other vehicles in the Codex are in toughness 6 or 5.
Yes.
10 wounds, 4 up armor, and it has feel no pain built in as well from rugged construction, which is great. It's 3 weapons. The heavy mining laser stacks really well, again, with the Hive Cult and Jackal Alphas. It gets all those benefits we mentioned in part 1. Most of the time, I think you'll see it taken with the clearance incinerator, which is a big, fat, heavy flamer. And because this vehicle is really good in combat, unlike most vehicles, it wants to close the distance.
Yeah.
So taking a weapon that auto hits at 12 inches, and that's kind of the threat range for it to charge, I think the incinerator will be the normal selection for it.
Yeah.
The problem is it's also the most expensive.
Yeah.
So
why do you think this model is being overlooked so much at the moment?
look, vehicles are in a funny spot in the current game of 40k at the moment because people are building to kill knights. And I think the way I'm looking at this army is a lot like when I built my Drakari army back in 5th edition. If you take one vehicle, it's just going to die.
Yeah.
You need to flood the board with a school of piranha as opposed to a single shark. So my Drakari army features 10 to 12 vehicles every time I build it. For this army, for the tournament coming up, has 9 vehicles in it.
Yeah.
At 1,500 points, it's got 3 Goliath trucks, 3 Ridge Runners, and 3 Armoured Sentinels. That's an awful lot of armor at 1,500 points. Even though it's not heavy armor, it's like, what's that, 10, 20, 30, 60, it's probably 70 or 80 wounds across toughness 6, 4 up, 3 up armor. Like 40k works on numbers.
Yeah.
And I think that taking a rock grinder or 2 just sees them get blown up.
Yeah.
Taking 3 plus 3
The
to
other
4
stuff.
trucks
Yeah.
plus Ridge Runners plus Scout Sentinels, you just put too much armor on the table and you overwhelm people because they just can't kill them quickly enough. But I do really like the rock grinder. It's one that I want models of.
Why would you take the Scout Sentinels?
Because I can only take 9 armored sentinels and I've got another fast attack slot.
Okay, so sorry, I was just teasing.
I know. I had an answer though because I was waiting for it.
I'm sure you were.
That's how good I am.
Oh, you're right. At something. 2 transport options.
Yep.
So the Chimera.
Yep, the Cult Chimera is literally, again, a carbon copy paste of the Brood Brothers. The
Imperial Guard.
Astra Militarum Imperial Guard arm.
Yep.
Interesting point to note, though, is they fixed the transport capacity on it because in the index, you could just put 12 Genestealer Cult models in it, which meant you could put Genestealers in it. You could put any of the Genestealer units in it. Now it specifically says Brood Brothers Infantry.
Okay, right.
So you can't cram it full of Genestealers and then drive it towards the enemy.
Yeah.
Whereas the Goliath truck, which is, again, the reason I like it, you can put
Yeah.
Genestealers in it because it specifies Cult Infantry. So you
Yeah.
can't put Brood Brothers in a Goliath, and you can't put anything other than Brood Brothers in a
the
Chimera.
Yeah. So the Goliath truck is 72 points.
Yep. And for what do you get? It's good.
Yeah.
It's 72 points, and you get a twin autocannon and a heavy stubber, 10 wounds, toughness 6, movement of 12. It's got feel no pain built in. It can carry everything in the army, more importantly. The Patriarch takes up 5 spots, but that's okay. It's open topped, so you can shoot out of it. It's actually really comparable to a Raider or a Venom. And if you take, for the same points as 10 Neophytes with a couple of grenade launchers in a Goliath, you basically get a Raider with a disintegrator cannon, and I think I worked that out to be 7 Carbolite Warriors with a blaster. And the Genestealer Cult will win that exchange more often than not because the vehicles just are better than a Raider. It doesn't have fly is the only thing it doesn't have going for it. But it's a good mid-range vehicle. It's just the game isn't very kind to mid-range vehicles at the moment.
And you're trialling
I've got 3. Yeah, I've got 3 for this army.
And the last one is the fortification, which is the frag drill, which
Yeah.
we spoke about.
it suffers from the fact that it is a fortification. It's got some nifty rules, and I think for narrative play,
Yeah, and fun games.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I think the chances of seeing it in a tournament are pretty low.
So that is all the rest of my notes, and we have 3 minutes before we have to leave to go get our kids from school. I guess what I had wanted to do, but obviously really underestimated how long this was going to take, is, and so I'm going to run this past you while we're recording to see if you think this is a good idea for the next episode, to actually go through, if we record now, not now, but prior to the event, what you're actually taking and why you've made those choices and what you're hoping to achieve with them, and then do a post-event look at it as well around, well, this is what I was expecting, but actually what happened was this, or, this worked better than I thought. This needs this in order to go with it, to be able to layer these on top.
Yeah, look, I definitely think there's an opportunity there to learn, because it's 4 games at 1,500 points.
Yeah.
It's an army I've never used, and I'm working with the models I have, but I'm also working with something I think will actually work. So, I definitely think there's an opportunity there to follow up this episode with one more, because I can talk about my planned psychic powers and the stratagems I intend to use. And there is more to this codex in the form of stratagems and relics and psychic powers. Yeah, but talking about those in context with an army is probably more relevant, and how it layers and stacks. So
I guess that's what I was hoping as well. I know that there's still, although we've talked it's going to be 2 hours by the time we do the wrap up, there's still so much more in there.
And
but
like I said to you in the break, this is one of the smaller codexes, and it's these episodes, if we did them like a full-on investigation into them, would easily be 3+ hours. Yeah. And it'd get worse with some of the bigger books. Just
so you know, please don't expect any more codex reviews until after show. Everything between now and show is going to be fluff.
It's not going to be fluff. It just, the format is not conducive before show.
No.
We'll see.
There's only so much brain power that I have, and since I can't say patriarch without accidentally saying Primarch today, I think I'm reaching my limit.
So the Genestealer Cult Codex standalone is probably not quite top tier, but it's definitely a competitive book. I definitely think there are builds there that will be really interesting for the game for the next 12 months. Whether it wins a tournament or not by itself is up for conversation, but I definitely think it's going to be an army that will mess with people until they either get used to it or the Genestealer Cult player adapts and makes it really scary. Mm-hmm. So, anyway, we will take a quick break, and then we will wrap up the episode in just a second.
So we're back again.
And that's probably one of the longest, if maybe, I don't know if it is the longest. It probably will be. We've been creeping towards 2 hours now for the last year, so.
Oh, I think we might have finally tipped over the edge.
I don't know. It'll be fun to see it in the edit, and once I take out some of the mess ups, we'll see. And we still haven't covered the whole book.
No.
We've still got stratagems in there. We kind of very briefly mentioned the psychic powers. None of the relics have been covered. But you've already got an idea for another episode anyway, which we've just talked about, saying and talking about the army I'm taking to Skulls in a couple of weeks.
Yes.
So that'll be an interesting one to record shortly. But in the meantime, we'll wrap this up here.
Have you got anything that you want to specifically add about Genestealer Cult?
It's going to be an army that is hard to buy, but also is going to have a...
It's not hard to buy.
Well, it depends on how happy you are with your credit card being smashed.
It's expensive to buy. It's easy to actually make the purchase.
That is true.
It's just expensive. I'm assuming it is. Everything is readily available in stores?
I think most of it is.
Mail order only?
No, I think most of it is. There's a couple of...
I'd assume that, yeah.
Like if you can get your hands on an old copy of Overkill, that comes with...
A lot?
I think it's 12 Acolytes... 20 Neophytes, you get the Brood Coven, you get a couple of Genestealers, and you get 4 Aberrants. So 200.
Nice start.
Well, it's $260, but you also get the Death Watch in it. So if you can sell the Death Watch for $100, then it's actually a really affordable way of starting the army.
Except, as you said, that isn't available.
No, it's out of production.
So you do have to buy an old copy of it.
Tooth and Claw, which they released not that long ago, was Space Wolves and Genestealer Cult.
Mm-hmm.
Again, in that sort of $250 Australian dollar range. And if you bought the parts individually, if you only bought half of it, and then you split that up into parts, it's obviously cheaper to buy in that box.
Yeah.
And then there's a couple of the battalion boxes they released around Christmas, which were the Genestealer Cult ones. So you got a truck and you got acolytes, neophytes, characters. Any of those sort of army boxes will always do you well, as long as you, particularly with Overkill, a lot of it's snap fit models, so it's 2 or 3 part kits.
It does mean that you
have
have
to be
very little
variety. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you have to be willing to make that sacrifice. Or if you buy an Overkill and then say you do get a copy of Tooth and Claw, the multi-part acolytes you get in that kit can obviously be cut up. You can cut up the standard pose ones and then sort of kit bash them together, which is what I've done for my Hand Flamer squad.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, there's definitely ways of doing it, but I think if you're wanting to make a proper competitive one, you should be expecting, for Australian dollars, it'll be $1 per point, which makes it
At least
one of the most expensive, if not the most expensive army in the game today. I think Orcs, if you build one of those big Horde-style armies, comes close. But the other thing to consider when you're building this army is, are you going to be willing to paint it?
I literally took the words right out of my mouth. I was just thinking, when you're buying models or using models that are 7 points a model, there's the ability
And
to
you
get...
want 100 of them.
Yeah, well, I think you said you wanted 120, didn't you?
That's 6 units of 20. And realistically, I think most of the really competitive armies will have between 60 and 100 of those alongside other infantry. So
yeah, well, that's a lot to paint.
your model count at 2,000 points. If you go infantry without any of the vehicles, your model count at 2,000 points could easily be 200 plus models without even trying. Particularly when the single most expensive model that's not a vehicle in the book is 125, and you're going to have 3 of him. So
I think we're seeing... I'm going off track, I'm sorry. I think we're seeing more and more Horde armies coming around.
yeah, the game's definitely better for Hordes at the moment.
And what springs to mind is there's obviously a lot of contention around being able to play Horde armies within a time limit.
Yeah.
So obviously if you're playing a Horde army, you need to be able to know how to use it and move it quickly, that kind of thing. But I think for people who don't play Horde armies, it's really important to practice against Horde armies, because you're going to be facing them in tournaments more and more often. Well, that's what I'm seeing more and more often.
Yeah, the body counts are going up.
Yeah.
I think
You get the occasional army turning up where you've got
7
5
models.
models,
Yeah.
but it's few and far between. We're getting many more where, it's sort of 20 minutes for them to get them out of the case.
Well, the army I've got for next week, which we'll talk about in the next episode, but very briefly at the moment, has about 50 infantry and 9 vehicles. So it's not a super big Horde by any stretch, but that's based on the models I own.
And it's only 1,500 points.
It is. But the thing is, if I ditched the 9 vehicles I'm running...
Yeah, you can get your 120.
Well, that's 650, 700... Like, it's about just under half the army in those vehicles,
Yeah.
which means that logically breaking 100 models would be really simple.
Well, didn't I work out that for the 120 it's 840 points?
Well, it's 140 points for
So-
20. So 6 units of that, 6 4s are 24, so 840 points. Yeah.
I'm really pleased that you checked my maths on that, but yeah.
Well, you're right.
Yeah, it's always nice.
And then you only need 2 HQs at that point. You've got 160 points to break it to 1,000 points, and 2 HQs makes that legal. So you can do that for as little as 53 for an Icon Ward, and I think the next cheapest HQ is going to be 70 for the Jackal Alphas. Not that she does much for the army. You'd probably go Primus for the extra 5 points.
Yeah.
So yeah, for 1,000 points, you could go 120 Acolytes and the 2 characters, and that'd be a legal Battleforged 1,000-point army. Playing that in 90 minutes at First Blood for 2020 is a stretch. There's a lot of models there.
Well, again, not necessarily. If you know how to use it and you know how to move it and you know how to play with it, then...
Yeah. Oh, look, movement trays are becoming a thing for 40k of late, and for Age of Sigmar for that matter.
I saw a really cool one at the last event that we had, but sadly I have absolutely no idea who had it. So
look, I know OTP Terrain does 3D printed ones, and they'll do them in a variety of shapes and sizes and all the rest of it, which is... at 50 models, I don't feel like I need them. At
but
150
at
models?
150 models in a 90-minute game.
Yeah, you definitely want them.
But my point, since I know we've digressed, was that players who don't play Horde armies really do need to get some practice in against them so that they know how to to finish a game within a time limit as well, if you are looking at attending events.
Also, look at your own personal bias. I know plenty of people will look at an army of 100-plus models and instantly go, oh, my God, I'm going to get slow played.
Yeah.
Some of the fastest players are the ones who play these big armies because they understand that there's only so much time.
And they need to get it moved quickly.
And they need to know what they're doing. So we had it with an Orc army that won 2017?
I have no idea. All the years I've run into one.
Masters. It was 2250 points and he brought 280 Orcs.
Mm-hmm.
And he finished every game.
Yep.
And he won the event. And it was fairly terrifying. He did he win generalship or overall? I forget.
I can't remember.
In any case, that army, though, a lot of people went, oh my God, it's going to take so long. And Owen was just so rapid fire with it. He'd been practicing.
Like, whoa, check out the models. Look at the painting.
And then he was just smashing the games out. And the funny thing is, the one complaint I did get was a player going, I don't understand what's happening. Because Owen was just so rapid fire with knowing what he needed to do.
Yeah.
That we had to, he slowed down for a minute.
Do you mind slowing down
just explain it once.
Yeah.
And then that was fine.
Which is perfectly legitimate.
Absolutely. And Owen was fine about it. He just went he actually acknowledged that he was conscious of getting the game done in 3 hours at that scale. So I think that we saw it happen at we see it happen at a lot of the big team events around the world as well, where chess clocks are now slowly being introduced, and those big horde armies, instantly the opponent goes, I want a chess clock. And the irony is, a lot of the times, those players who are fielding those big armies, not every time, but a lot of the time, those big armies don't need the chess clock. It's actually the opponent who needs it, because
they're not used to playing it.
Yeah, and the big army knows what it's doing.
Yep.
And so the player in question smashes through their turns, and the opponent's left looking at 200 models going, oh my God, what do I do?
And the thing is, I have mentioned quite a few times that I am not a fan of chess clocks, but one of the reasons that they actually work well is because, for example, and I know that we are totally off on a totally different tangent here, so unlike us.
Well, we're going to hit 2 hours now, so.
Oh, I was determined we were going to tip it over. No. So what can happen is self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah.
I don't want to play against horde armies because they're so big, they're going to take so long, there's no way we're going to finish this game. And you look at the stats and you go, I'm going to use Owen for an example because obviously I know that he plays the Orc army, even though he did finish all of his games. So you look at the stats afterwards and you go, yeah, Owen didn't finish a single game and he's fielding 220 models. What does that tell you? It tells you that Owen needs to play faster. One of the things with the chess clock is that you look at it and go, of those 2.5 hours, Owen only used 55 minutes of it.
Yeah.
And the other, his opponent was using more than the lion's share. You cannot blame that on Owen for not finishing the game.
Yeah. And I think that's probably where more use from a chess clock comes from for an organizer, is to kind of dispel some of those issues or highlight to some of those players that, hey, you need to kind of speed things up a little bit, and that could just come from being relaxed at gaming, or if you've got a problem player who does take a big horde army and takes forever to play it, then you can actually talk to them about that and go, look, here's the situation.
But it's just as likely that you've got someone who's taking 5 models, 7 models, and who doesn't know how on earth to face 220 and what to do in order to best maximise their possible potential for
there's a deer in the headlights moment completely possible, where someone rocks up with that many models, and if they're prepared and organised and know how to play it, and they look at your army and go, oh, okay, cool, you got flyers, don't worry about them, can't kill them, ignore those, I only have to kill this, and this, and they just swarm the board, and their first 2 turns are fairly rapid.
Yep.
And things like an Orc army or a Gene Stealer cult, they kind of do their work turn 3. Turn 2, turn 3.
Yeah.
If turn 1's over in a heartbeat, then particularly if they're using movement trays and all those sorts of tricks.
Or blips when they're
not
really. Yeah.
Which we talked about in episode 35 about the blips. The biggest slow point of a Gene Stealer cult army is actually the blips, not because they're slow to put down when you're deploying. They're actually slow because you then have to make the decisions of where everything's deploying based on where those blips are. And going in without a plan for that is
tricky.
A problem. So, but anyway, so, be prepared to play fast, be prepared to know your army really well, and obviously the more you know about your opponent's armies, the faster that'll get as well.
So, which does bring me back to the practice.
Yeah.
And I think what can happen is I just don't want to practice against those big horde armies because they just take too long, or it feels overwhelming, that kind of thing. But if you don't practice against them, you won't know how to
Yeah, I mean,
your army.
it's not hard to basically set a timer on your phone and just keep track of the time and actually time a game or a chess clock of some kind. So practice in the environment you're going to be playing it in. If you're going to be playing the army, get a mate around and go, cool, we're going to play in a time limit. Here we go. And use an old player's pack or use an old mission that you've played at a tournament before, and then see if you can get it done. And then obviously finish the game regardless. But you know,
and we've got old players packs that are available on our calendar.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
you just jump on one of the
download one of them for the missions, and
and have a look at those.
Yeah. Anyway,
Because we don't ever take them down, so
no, it's easier to leave them.
Yeah.
It's not worth the hassle.
So just scroll through till you find an OBSEC logo, and then you can see.
Yeah, grab a pack.
Yeah, on our calendar.
Masters 2018 for ETC style.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to First Blood Part 2 this year, it's got a link to the current ITC mission pack as well.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously you can just head to Chapter Approved and get some of the latest GW core missions as well.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's our look at Gene Stealer Cult today. We're going to do another episode immediately following this about my army and what's coming and why it's coming. But in the meantime, thank you very much for joining us for another episode of Objective Secured's podcast. We hope you enjoyed yourself. And yeah, until next time, we'll see you. When's the next event? Show.
Yeah.
So we will hopefully, you're going to hear from us before show.
Oh,
but,
you'll definitely hear from us before show.
Keep an eye out for the next Wednesday live stream, and we hope you listen to the next podcast.
Yeah, happy gaming, everyone.
You've been listening to the Objective Secured podcast. If you'd like to get in touch, you can visit our website, objectivesecured.com.au. You can find us on Facebook, Facebook.com/Objective Secured, or you can email us, obsec@optusnet.com.au. Thanks for listening.